Dili lamang lamion. Ang prutas nga durian dili lamang lamian kun dili adunay ubay-ubay usab kini nga mga health benefits. Ang pagkaon sa prutas nga durian makapaubos sa risgo sa cancer sa lawas sa tao. Ang mga compounds na sa durian makapugong usab sa mga sakit sa kasing-kasing. Ang durian dakong tabang usab pagpakigbatok sa infeksyon ug katapusan ang pagkaon sa prutas.
Kaugnayan pakinggan natin ang mga naging pahayag ni Senator Risa Hontiveros. Proseso at kapansin-pansin umano na naganap ito kasabay ng pagbulita ng ika-40 anibersaryo ng People Power Revolution na aniya ay sumisimbolo ng panibagong yugto ng pagpapahayag ng kapangyarihan ng mamamayan. Habang wala namang naging komento sa Senate President Vicente Tito Soto III sa nasabing pagdinig, aniya masyado umano silang maraming ginagawa sa Senado para manood pa ng ibang issue. Nakafocus umano ang kanilang prioridad sa mas mga nakakatulong sa bansa. Kaugnayan, pakinggan naman natin ang mga naging pahayag ni Senator Vicente Tito Soto III.
Nanonood eh. Shadow busy. Para panood ng iba. Basta yung maraming importanteng agenda na mas makakaigagay, mas malakas ang impact para sa mga kababayan natin kaysa sa mga para sa aming mga individual na senators. Dapat mas priority makakatulong.
Para naman kay Senator Robin Hood Padilla, na kilalang kalyansa ng mga Duterte, hindi niya umano kayang manood sa ginagawang pagdinig ng ICC sa dating Pangulo. Hindi din umano niya na alam na nabanggit sa pagdinig ang kapwa kalyansang mga senador na sina Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa at Christopher Bongo, na dati nang tinukoy ng ICC na co-perpetrators ni Duterte sa kanyang kontra-illegal na droga o kampanya kontra illegal na droga. Ayon kay Padilla, hindi umano katanggap-tanggap na nililiti si Duterte sa ibang bansa. Samantala, Bombo Dennis, magtrabaho muna tayo. Yan ang mga binitawang salita ni Senator Bongo matapos na mabanggit ang kanyang pangalan sa pagdinig sa ICC kahapon. Mananatili umano siyang maninindigan sa kanyang mga naging unang pahayag na hindi siya natatakot sapagkat wala siyang kasalanan. Nag-uulat live mula sa Senado, ako si Bombo Angelo Aganan, and this is Bombo Radyo Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radyo, Bombo!
Mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation, bago ho tayo umusad sa iba pang malalaking balita, ngayong oras po na ito, nasa linya ng ating komunikasyon via Zoom si Attorney Mark Tolentino, isa ho sa mga kilala na naghain kamakailan ng ilang petisyon. May kinalaman din ho dito sa usapin kagaya ng kinakarap po ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, and of course yung mga related na mga paksa ay kanya hong may paliwanag na rin sa atin yung kanyang mga salobin hinggil ho dito sa itinatakbo ng kaso ni former President Duterte dun ho sa International Criminal Court. By the way, si Bombo Dennis Hamito po ito. Pabatiin muna namin po kayo. Attorney Mark Tolentino, please go ahead. Welcome to the program. Okay, Attorney?
Good afternoon po sa atin lahat, sa mga followers natin, mga viewers natin dyan sa Bombo Radyo Philippines.
Ayun. Maraming salamat ho at kayo'y aming nakausap sa pagkakataong ito. Unang-una, makikikumusta lamang ho kami. Are you satisfied, Attorney, doon sa itinatakbo ho ng kaso nitong si former President Rodrigo Duterte? Nagsimula na ho kahapon and nabigyan ng tsansa ang prosekusyon at maging ang panig ng depensa na makapagsalita ng kanilang panig. Ano po so far ang inyong obserbasyon, Attorney Mark?
With respect to kumpiyansa or satisfied, hindi natin pag-usapan yan kasi in the very first place, I believe in my personal capacity na yung ICC, International Criminal Court, walang jurisdiction sa kaso na ito kasi very clear kasi yung ICC rules na in order na may jurisdiction sila, kailangan walang working and functioning justice system sa Pilipinas. Kasi kung tagapin po natin yung jurisdiction ng ICC, it means inamin po natin na wala tayong working Department of Justice, wala tayong working Supreme Court. And hindi naman yan ang totoo kasi we have a strong and working DOJ, strong and working Supreme Courts.
May mga nagsasabi na maganda yung pagkalatag ng lead counsel ni former President Duterte na si Nicholas Kaufman. Pero may buwelta rin yung panig po ng kabila na sa panig ho ng prosecution. So sa tingin ho ninyo, magkakaroon ba ng kumbaga dibdiban na tunggalian itong magkabilang panig batay dun sa mga nailatag na inisyal na impormasyon, bagamat kayo man ay hindi sumasang-ayon na ang International Criminal Court ang siyang duminikho nito, attorney?
So with respect sa ganyang kaso, narinig ko kasi yung mga abogado ng prosecution and of course the good lawyers ng depensa. Nakita natin yung abogado ng prosecution is ginagawa nila ang ICC as a political court. Ibig sabihin, nag-base sila sa mga isyung papolitika, sa Pilipinas, which hindi naman yan dapat pag-usapan. Kasi ICC is a court of law. When say court of law, kailangan mag-base lang dapat tayo sa ebidensya, mag-base lang tayo sa batas. Hindi dapat gawing political circus ang ICC.
Okay. Attorney, kani-kanina lamang ay nagpatawag ho ng press conference itong si Attorney Levito Baligod and si former Representative Mike Defensor, no? At nagbunyag ho sila ng tungkol doon sa issue ng umano'y suhulan ng milyong dolyar para ho sa mga International Criminal Court prosecutors. At idinadawit ho nila itong pangalan ni former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV and yung former representative na si Elisal Dico. Ano ho ang take po ninyo dito, attorney?
Kung tingnan mo yung mga sinasabi nila, yung ICC talaga, it can confirm na yung kaso ni former President Digong Duterte, may connection yan sa isyung domestic or pamulitika dito sa Pilipinas. It confirm na yung si President Digong Duterte hinidnap para at least ma-neutralize ang mga Duterte dito sa Pilipinas. Lalo na i-avoid nila na may isang Duterte na manalo for 2028 election. But of course, yung mga sinasabi through the press conference kanina, kailangan pa yan patunayan in courts, but kailangan din na sagutin yan ni Senator Trillanes or yung iba pang sangkot kung ano talaga ang katotohanan.
Attorney, alam ko dati nakapaghain po ang inyong panig ng ilang petisyon dyan sa kataas-taasang hukuman. As of now, meron ho bang pending petitions pa na hinihintay related ho dito sa sitwasyon ni former President Rodrigo Duterte?
May mga kaso pang pending which hindi naman ako yung handle, but of course may iba mga lawyers na mga kaibigan po natin, but may mga pending pa like yung issue about habeas corpus, yung issue na constitutionality, yung about sa paghuli ni former President Digong Duterte na pending ngayon sa Korte Suprema. And until now, we are waiting for the resolution ng Supreme Court.
Paano ho kaya ang magiging implementasyon if in any case ay magkaroon ng resolusyon sa lalong madaling panahon ang Korte Suprema dito ho sa writ of habeas corpus? Paano ho ba ang magiging sistema rito, attorney? Knowing
in my personal capacity, very clear na yung Supreme Court kasi is the Supreme Court ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Under lang niya ang Court of Appeals, under niya sa Ligan Bayan, the Regional Trial Court, yung MTC. But hindi nila under ang ICC because the ICC is under their own statute. It is an international court. So, para sa akin, maging moot and academic na walang authority ang Supreme Court na sabihan ng ICC na ibalik si Digong Duterte sa Pilipinas. But of course, the Supreme Court may jurisdiction and may authority to declare na yung paghuli sa kanya is legal ba or illegal, may kidnapping ba nangyayari or wala, may pang-abuso ba sa Philippine government sa pag-surrender sa kanya doon sa The Hague, Netherlands. So yun na lang ang dapat tutukan ng Supreme Court kasi pag i-order ng Supreme Court na pabalikin si former President Digong Duterte sa ICC, i-order ICC, walang jurisdiction ng Supreme Court sa ganung bagay.
Hmm. So kung ganun po, attorney, sabi nyo magiging moot and academic na, pero ano ho yung nakikita pa natin na posibleng legal remedies dito sa sitwasyon po na ito? Ano pinaka, kumbaga, win-win solution para ho hindi, kumbaga, masaklawan ng local
Okay.
courts yung international
Dalawang
criminal
option
court?
yan. Dalawang option yan. First option, kailangan galingan talaga ng mga abogado doon sa ICC na hindi na ituloy ang trial. Dito pa lang sa pagbasa ng mga aligasyon, i-dismiss na ang kaso kasi walang probable cause and pabalikin na si Tatay Digong Duterte sa Pilipinas. So, depende yan sa ating mga abogado and sana yung ICC will decide based on law, based on evidence, and of course, based on merits. Yun ang first natin tutukan, yung performance ng ating mga abogado and the fairness ng ICC. And second naman natin na pwedeng gawin is through diplomatic channel. But of course, tingnan natin yung ating presidente kasi the President of the Philippines, ngayon si BBM, siya talaga ang chief ambassador ng Pilipinas. So tingnan natin kung bilang Pilipino, kalimutan sana niya yung mga isyong papolitika, kung di tingnan lang niya dapat si Digong Duterte bilang isang Pilipino. Bilang isang Pilipino, may obligasyon siya na depensahan ng isang Filipino citizen. Hindi na sana niya tingnan na si Digong Duterte bilang isang presidente. Tingnan niya si Digong Duterte bilang isang Pilipino, and yung Philippine government may obligasyon na depensahan, protektahan ang bawat Pilipino. Kung may nangyaring mga OFW na sangkot sa mga krimen, mga issues sa ibang bansa, didepensahan nga natin sa ating government. How much more ang former president? But in this case, bilang isang Pilipino, the Philippine government has an obligation to protect and defend si President Digong Duterte. Kalimutan na nila na si Digong Duterte bilang former president, but dapat hindi nila kalimutan na si Digong Duterte ay isang Pilipino.
Okay, with that, maraming salamat po, Attorney Mark, sa napaka, kumbaga, komprehensibong paliwanag po mula sa inyong panig. Of course, yan po ay batay sa inyong obserbasyon din dito sa mga nangyayaring mga development sa kaso ng former president. Thank you so much, Attorney.
Thank you, Bombo Radyo Philippines.
Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, nakausap po natin si Attorney Mark Tolentino, isa ho sa mga abogado na nakatuon din ho ang atensyon dito sa mga usapin may kinalaman kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. At standby din mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, ang iba pa nating mga reporters sa labas at makakausap din ho natin sila maya-maya lamang sa iba pang mga updates mula sa kanilang mga lokasyon. By the way, nasa linya rin ho ng ating komunikasyon si Father Bong Sarabia. Makakausap po natin sapagkat I heard may mga activities ho. Maybe bukas, may mga events din ho. Yung mga anti-Duterte, pro-Duterte, and siguro makibalita na rin ho tayo doon sa kanilang mga obserbasyon dito sa mga kaganapan ho na ito. Magandang hapon po ang aming pagbati mula sa Bombo Radio Philippines. Si Bombo Dennis Hamito po ito. And welcome to the program. We are nationwide and worldwide. Father Bong, magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon po. Sa EDSA Shrine po ako. May sharing ngayon dito about the life and legacy of Cardinal Sin.
Okay. Father Bong, makikumusta po kami. Ano itong mga magaganap po na activities bukas? At meron ho bang mga pwedeng salihan o makapag-participate ho itong ating mga kababayan dyan sa mga events, Father?
Bukas, sa hapon, alas 3 talaga magsisimula yung Trillion Peso March, ikatlong pagganap ito. Pagkatapos sa evening, 6 o'clock dito sa EDSA Shrines, the Archbishop Sok Villegas ay magmimisa. 40th anniversary ng EDSA. Ayan po.
Okay.
Very significant po ito dahil 40 sa scripture ay panahon ng pagbabago Diba? So, ayan, 40 years yung Israel Israelites sa disyerto, bago sila makapasok sa Promised Land, 40 days si Jesus nag-fasting. So, yun, very significant from 40.
Okay, Father
Yes,
Bong. Talagang inaasahan po ng marami na syempre maraming aangkas dito ho sa aktibidad po na ito dahil malaking kaganapan ho ito. And I heard may mga pro-government, anti-government gusto rin hong mag-participate. Meron nga mga anti-Duterte, pro-Duterte. So ano ho ito? Welcome din ho ba sila dyan sa mga activities? Dahil may mga other agenda, may mga other issues po sila na gustong ilahad sa publiko. Pwede rin ho ba ito?
I think generally yung organizer ng Trillion Peso ay anti-corruption talaga yung pinaka-banner advocacy nila. So kasama na dyan ang Clergy for Good Governance, kami mga ecumenical people, including mga protestante, ay kasama na rin dito. So we are for moral restoration muli at sana stability ng democracy sa ating bansa. Of course, may mga anti-Duterte na dito, pero kami, yung grupo namin, we don't want to say anti-Duterte. More of anti-EJK, anti-killings, anti-corruption, ganun po. So it could be Marcos, anti-Marcos, anti-Duterte, anti-other positions.
Bibigyan din ho ba ng pagkakataon? Halimbawa, may mga politiko na gusto rin magtalumpati dyan po sa activities ng EDSA anniversary. Meron ho bang puwang para sa kanila?
Alam ko may program na May program na. So, basically, this is handled by Tindig Pilipinas. Tapos yung Caritas Philippines. So, yun ang mostly Catholic at Christian. Tapos, yun ang constitutive governing body halos ng doon.
I see. Ay baka ho may mga panawagan na lamang po kayo, Father, para ho dun sa mga, may mga saloobin na gustong ilahad dito ho sa activities ng 40th anniversary ng EDSA People Power. Please go ahead po, Father.
Well, we celebrate EDSA. Napatalsik natin yung diktatorya dati, yung Marcos. At, pero dapat tuloy-tuloy ang ating laban against corruption. Ngayon, flood control, yun ang problema natin. Kailangan sampahan na ng kaso dapat may kaso, dapat aktibo na tayo sa mga protesta. Dahil kapag hindi tayo lumalaho, parang hindi din kumikilos ang ating mga kongresista at mga senador. Tapos yun na rin, no? Sa amin, we are happy na sa celebration natin ng 40th EDSA anniversary, dito din yung process din ng pagpapanagot kay Duterte at impending impeachment ni Sara Duterte ay nasa proseso na rin. So lahat na yun ay kasama, no? Sa ating purpose.
Father, I heard kahapon ay may mga kasamaan din po kayo na nag-observe dito sa proceedings ng confirmation of charges hearing dyan sa International Criminal Court. Could you please enlighten us ano ho yung parte o anong event po ito at ano so far ang naging tugon ho ng mga pamilya na katuwang ho ninyo na sumubaybay din dito?
Yeah. So, tinipon yung mga EJK families kapon sa Catholic Trade kung saan doon yung center ni Father Flavi Villanueva, SVD. Tapos sa ibang grupo, UP Group, kasama nila Father Joel. So, natutuwa yung mga EJK families ngayon dahil yung stories nila na bu-broadcast na. Dati, takot sila eh. So, before 2017, we used to gather them. Sa misa, pinapasalita namin sila, sobra pang takot. Tapos, parang dinideny pa ang maraming stories nila. Pero ngayon, noon narinig nila kahapon na si Attorney Joel binibigkas yung mga pangyayari, ay at least na sabi na narinig na rin ang mga karanasan nila, yung magsidihin nilang kalagayan before under Duterte during that time.
I see.
So, yun.
With that, maraming salamat po, Father, sa mga update po na ito, and ingat po kayo.
Sige po, God bless po.
Mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, nakausap po natin si Father Bong Sarabia, ano? At yan ho'y may kinalaman doon sa ilang mga kaganapan bukas, and of course may associate pa rin ho natin doon sa pre-trial o doon sa confirmation of charges hearing na kanila din hong tinutukan kasama yung mga pamilya ng mga biktima ng war on drugs. Sa puntong ito ng ating balitaan, tunguhin muna natin ang bahagi po ng Davao City. Alamin natin kung ano naman yung mga reaksyon ng mga kababayan ho natin at mga kababayan ni former President Rodrigo Duterte hinggil dun sa unang araw ng confirmation of charges hearing, at ngayon sasalang tayo sa day 2. Alamin natin yan sa pag-uulat ng Bombo Radio Davao. Balikan po natin mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, yung mga kaganapan dyan sa Davao City upang makibalita rin ho tayo hinggil sa mga reaction, pati na yung mga local executives ho dyan sa iba't ibang bahagi, and of course mula sa pamilya Duterte talaga, sapagkat sila ho yung talagang nakatuon ng atensyon ho dito higit sa kanino man, sapagkat nandun itong si former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Yan, kunin na natin at nagbabalik sa linya ang Bombo Radio Davao.
Hiling ng abogado ni FPRRD sa ICC na ibalik na sa Pilipinas ang dating Pangulo. Sinuportahan din ng mga ito ang naging pahayagan ni Atty. Nicolas Kaufman na pawang pananakot lamang at walang halong intensyong kriminal ang mga pahayagan ni Duterte. Isa sa naging saksi sa mahusay na pamamalakad sa Davao City noon ni Duterte ay ang taxi at TOJ driver Reynaldo Supa, kung saan sinabi nito na kahit pa magdamag silang nasa kalsada, wala silang madalawa, natakot laban sa mga hold-upper. Dagdag pa nito, nalabis na kanilang pangungulila sa dating Pangulo at patuloy silang umaasa na mananaig ang hustisya upang siya ay makabalik sa bansa. Anila, hindi maikakaila ang naging epekto ni Duterte sa kanilang buhay at sa pamamahala ng bansa dahilan upang manatili ang kanilang suporta at paniniwala sa kanya. Sa ngayon, nakaantabay pa rin ang mga Davaoenyo sa ikalawang araw ng confirmatory hearing. At Bombo Dennis, ating pakinggan ang pahayag ni Reynaldo Supa, isang Davaoenyo.
The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte.
Okay. Sige, check natin yan maya-maya mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, kung mas malinaw na linya mula ho dyan sa Davao City. Pero bago ho yan, kunin muna natin ang linya mula sa International Criminal Court. Ang resumption ho ng confirmation of charges hearing ay ito ho ang day 2 mga kabombo, ating tunghayan.
Your Honors, situation in the Republic of the Philippines in the case of the President. Your Honors, situation in the Republic of the Philippines in the case of the prosecutor versus Rodrigo Roa Duterte, case reference ICC 0121-0125, and for the record, we are in open session.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would now like to call upon parties and participants to confirm that the people here in the courtroom are the same as the ones present yesterday. Mr. Prosecutor?
Madame la Présidente.
Good morning, Madam President, Your Honors. There are a few changes in the composition of the OTP team today. I'm here representing the office, as was the case yesterday. Beside me is Julian Nichols, senior trial lawyer. He was here yesterday. I also have Edward Jeremy with me, trial lawyer. Robin Croft, trial lawyer. Ai Do Young, Associate Trial Un Yo Young, Associate Trial Lawyer. Sylvie Wakam, Associate Trial Lawyer. Loria. And finally, James Miriti, our case manager. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Prosecutor. Legal representatives of victims. Good morning, Madam President. Only one change on our team. We have one change, a defection actually. One of our team members could not be with us actually.
Composition today, and we are once again ably assisted and supported by our Filipino colleagues in the gallery.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Prosecutor, you may now address the court regarding submissions on the merits. It is Mr. Jeremy who will be giving this presentation.
Thank you, Madam President. Your Honours, dear colleagues, my name is Edward Jeremy, and over the next 45 minutes or so, I will focus on some of the evidence that demonstrates Mr. Duterte's responsibility for the crimes charged in counts 2 and 3. My presentation will comprise two parts. Part 1 will focus on the crimes charged in count 2, and as you know, this count relates to the murders of 14 so-called high-value targets. And part 2 will focus on examples of crimes charged in count 3. And this count relates to murders and attempted murders of 45 victims in the course of barangay or neighborhood clearance operations. First, Your Honours, a brief introduction. As Mr. Nichols made clear yesterday, Mr. Duterte campaigned for the presidency that, on the basis that, if elected, he would implement his Davao model of killing on a national scale. And once sworn in as president of the Philippines on the 30th of June 2016, this is exactly what he did. One insider witness explained what applying the Davao model nationwide meant in practice, and this is tab 49. As we see on our screens, Evidence Channel 2, this witness stated, quote, "It means that he wants to apply how Davao addresses the drug problem in a national scope, the whole country. It means that zero tolerance on drugs. And what I understood is that we have to eliminate, neutralize drug pushers, just as in Davao." And as we've heard, this Davao model also included the payments of rewards for such killings. And as president, Mr. Duterte expanded and replicated this Davao model across the Philippines, working together with many of the same people, his co-perpetrators, following the same plan, and using the same methods. On becoming president, Mr. Duterte appointed his co-perpetrators from Davao, a number of whom Mr. Nichols introduced yesterday, to senior positions in the police and the government. And in these high-level positions, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators had authority over thousands of state personnel, including those that formed a national network that the co-perpetrators used to carry out the charged crimes, as Ms. Croft will shortly describe in more detail. And Your Honours, central to this plan to carry out the charged crimes was the formal national anti-illegal drugs campaign in the Philippines. And this campaign was launched through a document titled Command Memorandum Circular number 16, 2016. This was issued by newly appointed PMP Chief Ronald De La Rosa on the 1st of July 2016, the first full day of Mr. Duterte's presidency. On our screens, we see the first and last page of this document, and this is tab 112 of our binder. We see that the subject is, quote, PMP Anti-Illegal Drugs Campaign Plan, Project Double Barrel. And we see it is dated the 1st of July 2016. On the first page, there are a series of supporting references for this memorandum. And the first foundational reference is the quote, pronouncement of President Rodrigo R. Duterte to get rid of illegal drugs during the first 6 months of his term. And yesterday we heard multiple examples of the violent nature of those pronouncements and speeches. If we focus on the last page of this document, page 18, we see that the distribution list comprised the highest levels of law enforcement in the Philippines. And on the right side, we see it signed by Ronald M. De La Rosa, Philippine National Police, the PMP. And Your Honours, we'll look now at some parts of this document which essentially sets out general guidelines for the implementation of this project, Double Barrel. Focusing first on the execution of this project, Double Barrel, we see on in paragraph 5, now on our screens, as follows. The PMP intends to equally address illegal drug problems in the barangays and at the same time pursue the neutralization of illegal drug personalities, as well as the backbone of illegal drugs network operating in the country. And Your Honours will note the use of this word neutralization. While on its face, this word may be open to interpretation, insider witnesses provide evidence that within law enforcement within the Netherlands, within the Philippines, to neutralize meant to kill. And notably, one insider witness explained the significance of the use of this word neutralize in this command memorandum, and that's tab 54. And the witness stated as follows, quote, they used the word neutralize to emphasize the kill order of President Duterte, because that is the promise of President Duterte even before the campaign. And Your Honours, the sprinkling of references to human rights in this document should be viewed in this context. Moving on to the concept of operations, this is set out on page 3 of this memorandum as follows, quote, the PMP Anti-Illegal Drugs Campaign Plan, Project Double Barrel, will be conducted in a two-pronged approach, namely Project Tokang and Project HVT. The first prong or barrel, Project Tokang, focused on the clearance of the drug-affected barangays. And this relates to count 3, which I'll discuss shortly in the second part of my presentation. The second barrel, which relates to count 2, was Project HVT, or High Value Target, which I will focus on now. Turning to page 6 of this document, we read as follows. Project HVT is a massive and reinvigorated conduct of anti-illegal drugs operations, targeting illegal drugs personalities and drug syndicates. And as Your Honours are aware, it was in the course of this project HVT that the prosecution alleges the 14 victims of count 2 were murdered. And many of the high-value target victims of count 2 incidents were included in charts and lists that Mr. Duterte showed during public, often televised appearances and speeches. And just as he did in Davao, as president, Mr. Duterte publicly named persons he alleged were involved in drugs, and many of those would end up as victims in his so-called war on drugs. For example, on the 7th of August 2016, Mr. Duterte held a televised press conference in Davao City, during which he named 150 public officials who he claimed were involved in the drug trade. These included Albrera Mayor Rolando Espinosa and Osamis Mayor Reynaldo Parahinog, as well as various members of the Parahinog family. This speech is at tab 31, and we'll play 2 clips of that now.
Reynaldo Parahinog, alias Andong, the mayor of Osamis City. Nova Princess Parahinog Chavez used to be the wife of, I think, Colangco. Yung poster boy doon sa blandi-blandi pambuhok. Hindi naman, tisoy. Alam mo, baskin saya magpunta, abangan ko kayo. Kasi wala na ako sa presidency, habang may baril ako.
Wherever you go, I will be waiting for you, even if I'm no longer president, as long as I have a gun. And indeed, as your honours are aware, Mr. Duterte did not need to wait long. On the 5th of November 2016, Mayor Espinosa was murdered. That's charged incident 13. Then, on the 30th of July 2017, Mayor Parahinog, together with a number of others, was also murdered. That's charged incident 14. And during the same speech that we just saw, Mr. Duterte emphasized his direct involvement in the preparation of this list as follows.
The validation. I'm the one reading it, and I am the sole person responsible for this all.
And this list was subsequently published by the media, who referred to it as the narco list, or as we see from the article on our screens, simply the Duterte list. And Your Honours, Mr. Duterte continued to flaunt his list of so-called high-value targets. Perhaps the most significant of these lists was the President Rodrigo Roa Duterte list, or the PRRD list for short, and that's at tab 48 of our list of materials. Your Honours, this was basically an Excel-style spreadsheet that listed persons alleged to be high-value targets. The slide now on our screen shows the first page of the PRRD list, which includes photos of various persons designated alleged to be high-value targets. And at the bottom of this list are a series of different tabs, some of which have been enlarged on our screens. And as we see, they include different regions of the Philippines, and within these tabs are lists of names and identifying information of persons alleged to be high-value targets. And the persons included in this PRRD list were also assigned different levels, as set out in our PCB, in our brief, paragraph 99. As we see from the slide now on our screens, these levels range from 1 to 5. At the lowest level 1, this included lower-level government and police, as well as street-level pushers. And at the highest level 5, this represented the highest value targets: drug wholesalers, financiers, and high-ranking police officers. And consistent with the Davao model of killing, rewards were also paid when a high-value target was neutralized, meaning killed. And this evidence is set out at paragraphs 52 and 99 of our brief. And these rewards were not part of the regular PNP budget, but were provided by Mr. Duterte, who also publicly offered perpetrators rewards for killing. Your Honours, to sum up the significance of the PRRD list, I turn to the words of another insider witness, and this is tab 54. Quote, "This list was used by the police in their operations. And if you are in the list, you will be the subject for police operations. And most of the time, the people on the list are killed. So basically, the PRRD list is a dead list." And Mr. Duterte publicly paraded this PRRD list on multiple occasions. For example, during another televised speech on the 2nd of February 2017, tab 111, he stated the following.
This is the drug industry of the Philippines.
And in this same speech, we'll shortly see Mr. Duterte holding another page of this PRRD list, reacting to criticisms based on human rights in relation to his so-called war on drugs.
Tapos sabihin mo lang ako, takot-takutin mo ako ng human rights. Pakain ko ito, bunganga nila. Oh.
And Your Honours, on this issue of human rights, as Mr. Nichols explained yesterday, during his speeches in Davao, Mr. Duterte, well versed in the law, would occasionally seek to legitimize his encouragement of state violence by references to human rights and self-defense. And he continued to do so as president. For example, as we will see in the next clip, during a speech on the 20th of September 2016, which is at tab 130, he stated the following.
Pagka bumunot, patayin mo. Pag hindi bumunot, patayin mo rin. Oh, tangin. Para matapos na. Kasi maula pa bro. Ako na ang bahala sa inyo. Itaga ninyo ito sa puso ninyo. For as long as I am the president, nobody but nobody, no military man or policeman will go to prison because they perform their duties well. Ako ang mapakulong sila. Sabihin mo lang, utos ni Mayor yun.
So that was Mr. Duterte's message to the military and to the police. Kill, whether or not your target pulls a gun, and I will protect you. And Your Honours, as we will now hear, during the same speech, in case there was any doubt, Mr. Duterte made it very clear that this promise of protection related not only to lawful killings.
For as long as there is that power to pardon sa Konstitusyon, yan ang weapon ko against crime. Magmasakir kayo ng 100, di ba? 100 rin kayo, edi pardon lahat eh. Restored to full political and civil rights plus a promotion to both.
And Your Honours, as was so often the case, Mr. Duterte's message was repeated and amplified in the media, as we see in the next slide, which is tab 88, which reads as follows, quote, "Duterte to troops, massacre criminals, I'll promote you." With the byline, in the same speech, Duterte tells soldiers he will never order them to do anything illegal. And this was the pattern, Your Honours. Out of one side of his mouth, quietly, occasionally, he would speak about self-defence. This was Mr. Duterte, the lawyer, keenly aware of his own legal jeopardy, especially once he was no longer president. And out of the other side of his mouth, loudly, frequently, he would say, kill, and I will protect you, I will pardon you, and I will promote you. And this was Mr. Duterte, the strong man president who orders the murders of drug lords and alleged criminals. And as the charged incidents demonstrate, Mr. Duterte's co-perpetrators, as well as the police on the streets, understood his message to kill loud and clear. As an example, Your Honours, I'll focus briefly now on incident number 13. You'll recall that on assuming his presidency, Mr. Duterte publicly expressed his frustration with mayors who he alleged were involved in the drug trade, including Mayor Espinosa. On the 1st of August 2016, he gave Mayor Espinosa, then Mayor of Albuera, 24 hours to surrender to the police. And the following day, Mayor Espinosa did surrender to PMP Chief Ronald Bato de la Rosa. In a public speech on the 5th of August 2016, Mr. Duterte stated the following in reference to Mayor Espinosa's surrender, and this can be found at tab 129.
Problema niya ay yung mayor ng Albuera. Mabuti, nakaabot siya doon kay Bato na pinahanap ko, shot on sight, parang aso. Eh, ang tingin ko talaga sa inyo, kayo, parang aso.
And on around the 5th of November 2016, a few months after Mr. Duterte had him tracked down like a dog, Rolando Espinosa was murdered while in detention in Leyte Provincial Jail, together with another man, Raul Yap. According to the PMP's official narrative of this incident, there was a shootout between Espinosa and Yap and officers who attempted to serve search warrants on them while in prison. By contrast, the evidence demonstrates, as set out in paragraphs 107 to 110 of our brief, that these men were murdered in their prison cells in a coordinated operation involving various state agents. CCTV was disabled, guns were planted in their cells, rewards were paid. And as we see on the slide now on our screens, tab 48 of our list of materials, both Mr. Espinosa and Mr. Yap were included in the PRRD list, amongst other individuals whose names have been blurred by the prosecution. Rolando Espinosa in the upper row is recorded as a mayor and alleged to be a drug lord, indicated as level 4. And Raul Yap in the lower row is also alleged to be a drug lord, listed as level 3. The arrest of both men is noted, and this is shown on the right side. Then separately, it is noted that they were neutralized. And in a further indication that to neutralize meant to kill, as we see here, it is only on the date of their death, the 5th of November 2016, that they were noted as neutralized. Additionally, in the tab of the PRRD spreadsheet labeled High Value Targets, now visible on our screens, there is a photo of Mayor Espinosa. He's the person in the yellow T-shirt in the second row on the far right side. As you can see from the enlarged photo, he's been crossed out in red, which, as a witness confirmed, indicates that he had been killed. And if your honours look closely at this list, you'll see it appears to be the same list that Mr. Duterte held during a speech on the 2nd of February 2017. And for reference, these are tabs 48 and 111. And Your Honours, following these murders, Mr. Duterte continued his public threats. For example, on the 9th of February 2017, he stated publicly that mayors involved in illegal drugs should resign or face death. We'll play an extract of this speech, which is at tab 132 now.
Tatawagin ko yung mga mayor, ilak ko, no, kami-kami lang. Sabihin ko talaga sa kanila. Ayun, ganun kakapal yung pinakita ko sa inyo. Hanapin mo yung pangalan mo dyan, mayor. Tangina, pag nandyan yung pangalan mo, may problema. Talagang papatayin kita.
Mr. Duterte's message to the mayors could not be clearer. If your name is in my list, then I'll kill you. And in case anyone watching this speech has any doubt about his intentions, Mr. Duterte goes on to comment on extrajudicial killings. And as he does so, Your Honours will note the nonchalant, casual manner in which he draws his finger across his throat. Let's play the video.
Wala akong ako talaga ang wala akong maipagyabang. Kaya ginadaan ko na lang sa extrajudicial killing.
And in this opulent, gilded presentation room, the officials laugh along with their president while he boasts about his skills in extrajudicial killing. And outside, on the streets of the Philippines, the bodies pile up. The evidence from one data set shows that as at the date of this speech, 9th of January 2017, almost 1,500 people had been killed in Mr. Duterte's so-called war on drugs. And that's paragraph 73 of our brief. A few months later, in an April 2017 speech, which I won't play, but is a tab 134.2, Mr. Duterte called the deceased Espinosa a, quote, son of a bitch, and after citing multiple allegations of murders by the police, he said he would pardon and reinstate any convicted police officer with a, quote, promotion to ranks higher, end quote. Your Honours, I move now to the second part of my presentation, the murders and attempted murders committed during the barangay clearance operations. And these operations were covered by the first barrel of Project Tokang, which we looked at earlier. We'll briefly return to this document, CMC 16 2016, and the overview of the two barrels. As the slide on our screen shows, the stated aim of Project Tokang, just focusing on the first sentence, was, quote, accelerating the drive against illegal drugs in affected barangays, end quote. And in practice, Your Honours, this meant murdering some of the most vulnerable members of Filipino society. As witnesses stated, the poor were often targeted because they were the ones least likely to file complaints against the police. To quote one witness on our next slide, he stated, "It was said that the ones that we had to do the Tokang operation on had to be poor. Those who do not have the means to file a complaint or to complain." And similarly, another witness stated the following: "Based on what we've seen here in the Philippines, the people that were killed or could be killed were the poor, people with no means, simple people who were not able to file charges against them." Your Honours, Project Tokang operations were implemented across the Philippines in a number of ways, as set out in paragraph 75 of our brief. And these operations frequently followed the same modus operandi as we also set out in paragraphs 33 and 114 of our brief, which was as follows. A target was identified, often through the use of lists, such as barangay lists or police station watch lists. The target was then murdered in a police operation. Weapons, drugs, and money, or a combination thereof, were then planted at the crime scene. And then the police reports were repeatedly falsified to legitimate the operations as acts of self-defense. And in this context, as witnesses explain, the police often used the term nanlaban, which translates to fighting back, to describe incidents in which they supposedly shot a victim in self-defense. And these reports were often almost identical. In essence, copy-paste reports in which victims were frequently blamed for their own deaths. And finally, unofficial rewards were paid. Your Honours, I'll briefly focus on a few of the Count 3 incidents to illustrate this pattern. On the day of his inauguration, the 30th of June 2016, then President Duterte held a speech in Tondo, Manila, and he directly addressed the public present, including, as we will see, women and children. For reference, this is tab 127. Let's please play the clip.
Ako po'y galit. Pati yung mga pulis dito sa Maynila nakasabit sa droga. Ako po'y nakikiusap, wag ho kayong pumasok dyan kasi papatayin ko talaga kayo.
As we see, Mr. Duterte's message was clear. Stay away from drugs, or I will kill you. And the killing in Tondo began almost immediately following this speech, as we set out in our brief, paragraphs 100 to 101. I'll focus now on, and Tondo is visible on our screens. I'll focus now on incident 23, which also took place in Tondo, on or about the night of the 4th to the 5th of October 2016. As your honours are aware, the alleged victim of this incident 23 was Benjamin Vizda. And we'll shortly see a video which shows Mr. Vizda just before midnight in a vest, in handcuffs, forced onto a motorbike between two police officers and driven away. And this is tab 76, and we'll play the video now. And we see now Mr. Vizda being forced onto the motorbike between the two police officers. And as he's being driven away, we see women and children chasing after him, no doubt terrified about what would happen next. And around 20 minutes later, Your Honours, Mr. Vizda was dead, shot multiple times in the head by police officers. A witness described the scene, and Your Honours, the next slide will be a graphic image. And for reference, this is tab 77. The witness stated, quote, "The victim was lying on the street in handcuffs and was dead. He'd been shot in the head 7 or 8 times," end quote. The official account of this incident was recorded in a police report known as a spot report, dated the 5th of October 2016. This is tab 65. And this report, an extract of which is on the screen, stated that Mr. Vizda was killed by the police in self-defense after he snatched the firearm of a police officer while he was on a motorbike, while wearing handcuffs, and he shot at the police but missed. Your Honours, as demonstrated by the evidence in paragraph 126 of our brief, this narrative is false. Benjamin Vizda did not fight back. He was murdered. Your Honours, Project Tokang was also carried out through one-time, big-time, or OTBT operations. And these were large-scale, high-intensity police operations that often resulted in multiple murders. And one such operation took place in Bulacan shown on our screens between the 15th and the 16th of August 2017. In August 2017, the police made a press release regarding their recent operations, which noted that 32 people were killed by the police in simultaneous one-time, big-time operations from the 15th to the 16th of August 2017. This press release, which can be found at tab 108, is visible on our screens. In the headline, we read, quote, 32 killed, 107 arrested, as firearms, grenades, and numerous illegal drugs were seized in Bulacan, PNP, simultaneous big-time operations. I'm focusing, Your Honours, on the paragraph at the bottom of the screen. We see that the deaths of these 32 people were recorded as, quote, significant results, end quote, of the, quote, intensified campaign against illegal drugs, otherwise known as Project Double Barrel Reloaded, end quote. And this was essentially a reinvigorated version of Project Double Barrel, as set out in our brief footnote 37. And the press release goes on to name the 32 victims of this operation, which included 3 victims who are victims of charged incidents 28 and 29 in this case, who were murdered, consistent with the pattern of the other incidents in count 3, as set out in paragraphs 131 to 132 of our brief. Your Honours, 32 individuals killed by the police in Bulacan in a 24-hour period. You would imagine this would be a major national incident. So how did Mr. Duterte react to this shocking news? Let's hear what he said, and for reference, this is tab 147.
Yung namatay daw kanina sa Bulacan, 32, in a massive raid. Ganda yun. Makapatay lang tayo ng another 32 every day, then maybe we can reduce the what ails this country.
So that was the President's message in response to the death of 32 Filipinos in a single day. He essentially said to the police, well done, keep going, let's kill another 32 every day. And, Your Honours, in this context, as you would expect, the killings went on and on. This phase of one-time, big-time operations continued until around the 18th of August 2017, resulting in many more deaths. As one witness stated, quote, it was hunting season, a killing spree, end quote. And that's at tab 77. And on the evening of the 16th of August, in the midst of this killing spree, perhaps at the same time as Mr. Duterte's speech in Bulacan, a 17-year-old child named Cagayan de Santos was murdered in Caloocan, the location of which is marked on our screens. And this is charged incident 30. As usual, the police claimed that Cagayan de Santos shot at them and they were forced to shoot him dead in self-defense. Another victim blamed for his death. As set out in our brief, paragraph 133, this account is contradicted by CCTV footage showing police dragging the child across the ground, and other evidence shows that after pleading for his life, he was shot twice in the head. And the next slide is a graphic image, Your Honours, and that's tab 151. On our screens, we see the tragic image of the body of the 17-year-old child, Cagayan de Santos. And as noted in our brief, paragraph 56, this brutal murder led to a massive public outcry across the Philippines. And in these circumstances, exceptionally, the direct perpetrators of these murders were prosecuted and they were imprisoned. And in the face of this public outcry, Mr. Duterte was forced to temporarily withdraw police from drug operations from the 10th of October to the 4th of December 2017. And this led to a reduction in the frequency of killings. In announcing this temporary withdrawal, Mr. Duterte sarcastically stated that he hoped that this would satisfy, quote, bleeding hearts and the media, end quote. And in this way, he publicly communicated that this was not a genuine effort to prevent crime, but rather a temporary attempt to placate public criticism. And less than 2 months later, Mr. Duterte decided to once again scale up operations. He ordered the PNP back into the campaign, and the killings once again intensified. And, Your Honours, regrettably, children continued to be the victims of these killings. Your Honours will recall that at the very start of his presidency, Mr. Duterte gave a speech in Tondo, and we saw a part of it earlier. This is tab 127 on our list of materials, and we'll watch another portion of that speech now.
Yung mga adik ho dyan, kayo na lang ho ang pumatay. Kung anak niya, ikaw ang pumatay. Kung anak niyang adik, kayo ang pumatay para hindi masyado masakit.
If it's someone's child, be the killer yourself. If someone's child is the addict, then you be the one to kill. Your Honours, it's worth pausing here, taking a step back and reflecting on what we are seeing and what we are hearing. This is the President of the Philippines, the Commander-in-Chief, the most powerful man in the Philippines. He's pointing directly at the crowd, and he is telling them to kill someone else's child. Kill them, not because they are an alleged drug lord, not even an alleged criminal, but simply because they may have an addiction to drugs. And this is an example, perhaps, of what the defense described yesterday as Mr. Duterte speaking, quote, openly from the heart, sincerely and truthfully, end quote. And that's transcript 4, page 37, lines 15 to 16. And during an earlier part of the same speech, Mr. Duterte also boasted that during his presidency, funeral homes would make a lot of money. Let's play that clip.
Sabihin ko sa inyo, itong mga panahon nitong mga araw na dadating, kung may punerarya ho kayo, kikita kayo ng husto. Tayo ko yung mga small time na punerarya dito, doon. At sigurado hindi kayo malugi. At pag humihina na ang negosyo ninyo, sabihin ko lang sa mga pulis, bilis-bilisan ninyo ng konti para kumita yung tao sa negosyo nila. Ayan, sinasabi ko na sa inyo. Hindi ako nagbibiro.
So again, here's the president assuring funeral homes that if their business declines, he will, quote, tell the police, hurry up a little so people can make money from their business, end quote. And he stressed very clearly he was, quote, not joking. And as my friend said yesterday, transcript 4, page 30, lines 18 to 19, quote, for President Roddy, his word was his word, and the people knew it, end quote. In this context, to conclude, I'll focus briefly on incidents 38 and 45. As your honours know, in the course of these incidents, which occurred during 2018, on 2 separate occasions, the police detained a child aged around 14 or 15 years old. On each occasion, the police wrapped the child's head in packing tape so no one could hear them scream, and then strangled the child to death with wire. It's difficult to imagine a more terrifying end to 2 lives that had barely even begun. And these murdered children were then sold to funeral homes who profited from their bodies, as explained in paragraphs 142 and 150 of our brief. Your Honours, dead children, police ensuring that funeral homes made money. Mr. Duterte indeed was not joking. Thank you, Your Honours. This concludes my presentation. I now hand over to Ms. Croft.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Judge Motors, thank you very much, Mr. Prosecutor, for your presentation. I think we are going to observe a break of 40 minutes up to 11:30 a.m. Thank you very much.
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, yan ho ang unang bahagi ng confirmation of charges hearing dyan sa International Criminal Court at yan ay para sa ikalawang araw ng mga proseso ho na ginagawa dyan sa International Criminal Court, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. So napakinggan ho natin si Prosecutor Edward Jeremy at inilahad ho niya yung ilan sa mga talumpati ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte sa ilang pagkakataon. May mga binabanggit ho na mga pahayag noong siya ay alkalde pa at hanggang siya ay isa ng ganap na presidente ng ating bansa. Mga taong 2016 at 2017 ay nabanggit ho dyan. At kabilang ho yung nai-report nitong mga nakalipas na taon na 32 na mga nasawi sa isinagawang anti-drug operation dyan sa probinsya ng Bulacan. Ungkat ho ito at bahagi ng kanilang mga ebidensya na inilalahad ng panig ng prosekusyon laban kay former President Duterte, mga kabombo. So mamaya ay inaasahan naman na ang panig ng depensa ang siyang maglalahad ng kanilang saloobin at mga impormasyong hawak kaugnay naman ng kanilang argumento para kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. So standby din ang ating news team dyan po sa bahagi ng lungsod ng Maynila para naman sa mga karagdagan report at yan ay kaugnay pa rin ng tinutugay nating kaganapan dun sa The Hague dyan sa Netherlands. At sa puntong ito, kuha tayo ng update dyan sa tanggapan ho ng Korte Suprema sapagkat ang kampo ng mga Duterte ay umaasa ho na mariresolba na ng kataas-taasang hukuman yung mga petisyon kagaya ng habeas corpus petition para naman sa dating Pangulo. At kaugnay niyan, may pag-uulat si Bombo Hilario.
Umaasa ang kampo ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte na ireresolba na ng kataas-tasang hukuman ang mga petisyon patungkol sa umunoy ilegal na pagkakaresto sa dating Pangulo. Sa eksklusibong panayam ng Bombo Radyo kay Attorney Salvador Paulo Panelo Jr., kanya ibinahagi na inaasang anumang oras ay pagdedesisyonan na ng Korte Suprema ang patungkol sa kaso. Alinsunod niya ito ng hingin kamakailan ang memorandum ng magkabilang panig sa petisyon inihain ng mga anak ni Duterte. Naniniwala si Attorney Panelo Jr. na ang aksyon o kautusan ito ng hukuman ang siyang huling bahagi na sa proseso bago tuluyang mag-issue ng pinal na resolusyon. Ang naturang abogado ay ang siyang legal counsel ni Veronica Kitty Duterte sa petisyon habeas corpus na kanilang inihain sa Korte Suprema.
Walang update sa ngayon. Ang pinakahuling nangyari dyan sa kaso ay require ng Supreme Court, ng Korte Suprema natin na magsumite ng mga memorandum yung mga partido dito sa petition for habeas corpus. So yan po yung mga petitioner, kasama na po yung kliyente naming si Kitty Duterte at si Mayor Baste at saka si Congressman Polong. Nangangahulugan na yun na yung huling pleading or filing na hihingi ng Supreme Court bago magdesisyon ito. Typically sa isang kaso, ang memorandum yung huling hinihingi ng korte. So, umaasa tayo na any moment pwede nang magdesisyon ng Korte Suprema.
Git naman ang naturang abogado na problema na umano ng ehekutibo o gobyerno na maiuwi pabalik ng bansa si former President Duterte. Ito'y sakaling paboran ng Korte Suprema ang kanilang petisyong habeas corpus at atasan ng mga respondents na ibalik at ipresenta sa hukuman ang dating Pangulo.
Ang posisyon namin dyan mula sa simula ay problema yan ng ehekutibo ng gobyerno natin kung paano nila mapapauwi si Pangulong Duterte na habang nakakulong na sa ICC. Ang posisyon namin, dahil silang may kagagawan yan, silang gumawa ng problema na yan, sila din ang dapat humanap ng solusyon para mapabalik siya.
Sa kabila nito, positibo ang kampo ni Duterte na mayroon pa rin paraan o hakbang maaaring gawin ng gobyerno upang maibalik ang dating Pangulo sa Pilipinas. Maaari niyang makilahok ang gobyerno sa International Criminal Court at igit na kaya namang magsagawa ng sariling paglilitis ukol sa kaso. Batay raw kasi sa Rome Statute ng International Tribunal, nagkakaroon lamang ito ng jurisdiksyon sa oras na walang kakayanan o ayaw magsagawa ng paglilitis ang Estado sa mga individual na sasangkot sa krimen.
Pero kung ako ang tatanungin nyo, ang nakikita kong mga paraan kung paano mapabalik ay ang pinaka madali diyan ay makilahok ang Philippine government sa ICC at sabihin sa ICC na meron kaming kakayahan na litisin si Pangulong Duterte dito sa Pilipinas. Kaya ayon na rin mismo sa Rome Statute na nagsasabing meron lang jurisdiction ang ICC kapag ang isang bansa na miyembro nito or dating miyembro nito ay walang kakayanan or ayaw litisin ang isang taong na akusahan ng krimen na sakop ng Rome Statute ay walang jurisdiction ng ICC. So yun ang pinakamadali. Na ang Pilipinas mismo makilahok at sabihin sa ICC na dito na lang namin lilitisin si Pangulong Duterte.
Sa kasalukuyan, nakabinbin pa rin ang mga petisyon sa Korte Suprema may kinalaman sa pagkakaaresto at pagpapadala kay dating Pangulong Duterte tungo sa The Hague, Netherlands. Nag-uulat mula dito sa lungsod ng Maynila, ito si Bombo Hilario and this is Bombo Radyo Philippines, the #1 most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radyo Bombo!
Oras natin 26 na minuto na makalipas ang ika-6 ng gabi at nagpapatuloy pa rin ho tayo sa pagtugaygay dito sa mga kaganapan kaugnay ng confirmation of charges sa hearing para sa kinakaharap na kaso ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. At para ho higit pa tayong maliwanagan dito sa mga proseso at mga aasahan pa ho ng ating mga kababayan, minabuti ho nating makausap sa pagkakataong ito si Attorney Ramses Victorious Gatchalian Villagonzalo para ho makapagbigay ng linaw sa ating mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation hinggil ho doon sa mga pagdadaanan pa nito hong kaso na ito, lalo't napakasalimuot na usapin at marami ho ang nakaabang. Hindi lamang mga Pinoy kundi maging ang mga dayuhan ay nakatutok din ho dito sa mga development na ito. Babatiin muna natin sa Bombo Radio Philippines. We are nationwide and worldwide. Si Bombo Dennis Hamido po ito. Magandang gabi po sa inyo. Attorney Ramses Villagonzalo, welcome to the program.
Good evening po sa lahat. Maayong gabi sa tanan.
Ayun. Mayang gabi po. Ano? At kami po ay napatawag po sa inyo upang humingi ng gabay dito ho sa nagiging takbo ng confirmation of charges hearing para na rin sa kabatiran ho ng ating mga kababayan sa iba't ibang dako ho ng ating bansa, yung mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation ho na nakasubaybay mula pa ho kahapon. Could you please enlighten us, Attorney, gaano pa ho ang posible na itagal ng mga proseso po na ito bago tayo umabot dun sa trial proper, Attorney?
Ganito po yan, sir. Yung pre-trial chamber nag-set ng 4 days of presentation or hearing for the confirmation of charges. So kahapon, tapos na yung arraignment, yung pagbabasa ng sakdal, and then nag-opening statement na lahat ng panig. Ngayon, ito yung tinatawag nila na submission of merits. Kung sa atin pa dito sa Philippines, parang it's just an introduction or partial summary or summation of
I mean, it's a partial enumeration of the evidence. Usually, hindi yan nangyayari, pero minsan narinig ko na yan sa court martial. Sa atin, hindi yan, sa regular courts po, hindi yan nangyayari. Pero ang purpose niyan sa ICC is to establish substantial grounds to believe that the suspect or the perpetrator has committed a crime, and therefore the charges should be elevated to the trial chamber. Bali, ang nangyayari ngayon, nauna ngayon ang prosecutor na pinapalabas niya partially yung mga evidence nila. Sabi niya sa count 2, tsaka sa count 3, yung sa count 2, yung mga high value targets na pinamatay, sila Mayor Espinosa, Parahinog, and all others. Yung sa count 3, yung second part niya, yung barangay clearing operations ng Tukhang. So, basically, sir, nilalahad ng prosecutor na dapat mag-stick yung charges. Dapat yung mga kaso na crime against humanity na 3 counts, dapat magpapatuloy at hindi ma-dismiss, dapat ma-elevate sa trial chamber.
Okay. Attorney, ito ho bang pagharap at hindi pagharap, si former President Rodrigo Duterte kasi ay may waiver na hindi ho siya humarap dito sa confirmation of charges hearing. In any way, meron ho ba itong epekto doon sa takbo ng kanyang kaso o wala ho itong impact, Attorney?
I think it's just so minimal kasi kung may disadvantage actually. Kung merong sinabi yung prosecutor or victims counsel na mali talaga or it's a pure invention, at least makall agad ng attention nung suspect yung counsel niya on real time. Bale, pag narinig niya yung mga sinasabing mali, pwede niyang bulungan yung counsel niya on that spot. Yun ang disadvantage. Hindi mangyayari yan kasi nag-waive naman yung former president.
But kung halimbawa ay after nito ay magkakausap si Attorney Kaufman at si former President Rodrigo Duterte at ilahad po niya yung kanyang mga puntos na kumbaga ito sabihin mo ay pwede ba itong i-object or anything after one day or siguro ang sunod po kasi dito ay sa Huwebes na. So pwede ho ba ito, Attorney, kung sakasakali?
Ang pwedeng mangyari yan, sir, kung mag-appear na yung former president, masasabihan niya on the spot yung counsel niya, pero yung counsel naman niya, hindi naman pwedeng mag-object yan while the other party is still presenting his side on the submission of merits. Ang mangyayari niyan, iti-take note yan ng lawyer niya, dun sila magsasalita when the time comes na sila na yung bibigyan ng opportunity.
Okay, so ibang-iba pala ito sa
yes, sir.
Sitwasyon dito sa mga courtroom ng Pilipinas sapagkat marami ng pagkakataon naman tayo ay nakabisita sa mga courtroom through coverage and for some instances ay na-invite pero ibang-iba itong mga proseso. Ano pa ho yung
Tama po, sir. Tama po, sir. Kasi sa korte natin pwede naman makipagbarahan through objections on the spot din.
Okay, so ano pa ho ang kumbaga pinakakakaiba sa mangyayari ho dito after nitong confirmation of charges hearing dahil 4 na araw ho ito and after this ano ho itong expected ho natin, Attorney?
Yes, sir. Ganito yan. Parang meron din akong nababasa o nagtatanong sa akin regarding ang possible effects ng hearing of the confirmation of charges. May mga possibilities po yan. Unang-una, it's possible na charges will not be confirmed. That is tantamount or to dismissal and then pwede na rin lumaya yung nakakulong kasi hindi nga na-confirm eh. And may isang effect pa is that pwedeng sabihin ng pre-trial chamber judges na time out muna, i-defer natin yung pag-decide whether or not ma-confirm o hindi. The judges will direct the parties to submit additional evidence kung meron man. Medyo alanganin pa. Or kung sa nakita na ng mga judges na may basihan na para iakyat ang kaso sa trial chamber, meaning nakakita na sila ng substantial grounds to believe that the suspect committed the crime charge, i-confirm nila yan. Yun nga sir, ang sabi ko, yung first scenario, merong historically, nag-research ako, merong 4 na suspects na yung charges nila hindi kinonfirm ng pre-trial chamber. Si Abu Garda, Mohamed Hussein Ali, Calixte Rushimana, saka si Henry Cogsi. So sila, eventually, kasi hindi na-confirm, nakalaya din sila. Pero meron ding nangyari sa ICC na na-confirm yung charges, napunta sa trial chamber, pero upon the evaluation of the trial chamber judges, na hindi pala to kadapat-dapat maisampa yung kaso, na-withdraw yung charges na vacated. Merong 3 tao naka-benefit niyan. Si Uhuru Kenyatta, Maxine Gawaka, saka si Simone Bigabo. Yun nga, marami pong possibility. Hindi po yung nakasalang dyan, talo na.
Mainam ho, ano? At sapagkat ito ho ay, kumbaga, public interest ho ito, no? May mga pro and anti na nakahabang ho dito sa mga kaganapan na ito. I'm just curious, Attorney Ram, kung gaano po katotoo dyan sa International Criminal Court na bawal magpakita ng emosyon. Sapagkat I heard a story dyan sa loob po ng International Criminal Court habang nakikinig dito sa proceedings medyo naluha and iniskortan siya patungo doon sa separate area. Gaano ho katotoo itong ganitong impormasyon? Bawal ba talaga magpakita ng emosyon, Attorney?
I think hindi naman siguro. It's just a matter of protocol dyan para hindi yung makahawa yung mga emotion na yan, baka ma-disrupt yung proceedings. Meron nga sa appeals chamber, I think si Vice President Bemba, convicted siya, nabaliktad doon sa appeals chamber, yung mga victims ng kaso niya, naghiyawan. Pinatahimik sila, maraming pinalabas. Ganon lang naman siya, parang strict observance of protocol na formal talaga.
Ayun, at least malinaw naman, hindi naman bawal. Kaya lang,
hindi naman pwede namang wag ka lang mangatar, wag ka lang mag-side comment, yung nakaka-istorbo or nakakahawa sa iba.
Okay. So at least guided ho yung kasi may mga kababayan ho tayo na nandun din. Yung iba hindi nga lang talaga nakapasok dahil parang first come first serve dahil limitado yung espasyo and nanatili na lamang doon sila.
Makikita naman natin yung visitors gallery medyo maliit lang.
Okay. Pagka dumating naman ho sa trial proper, ano ho ito? Pwede ba itong ma-shortcut dahil sa kung anumang mga rason na kung halimbawa sapat na itong ebidensya na naipresenta, pwede na bang desisyonan? Hindi na kasing tagal ng mga nakalipas ng mga kaso na may kaparehong nature ng crimes against humanity case, Attorney?
Ganito po yan. Kung na-confirm na yung charges, napunta na yung kaso sa trial chamber, yun na yung point na magtatanong na ang korte sa plea niya. Sa atin kasi arraignment and plea, isang upuan lang yan. Babasahan ng charges, tatanungin ka ng judge, guilty or not guilty, and then that's it. Kung guilty ka, may sentensya ka. Kung not guilty, trial on the merits. Sa kanila, pag nasa korte na, you will be inquired by the court, what is your plea regarding the charges? It's up to the accused. Accused na yan eh. It's up to the accused to say guilty or not guilty. Kung mag-plea siya ng guilty, hindi pa yan automatic talaga. There will be searching questions from the court kung totoo ba yung freely given mo yan. Yung hindi ka ba kinurse, hindi ka ba tinakot, wala bang pamilya mo na hinostage kapalit ng pag-plea ng guilty mo. Naiintindihan mo ba yung consequence? And then, apart from your plea of guilt, maghahanap din yung court, may corroborating evidence ba na magdudugtong sa pag-plea ng guilty sa kaso, may ibang evidence pa ba? Yun. Pero pag sinabi ng court na satisfied sila sa pagbigay mo ng plea of guilt plus other pieces of evidence, yan, pwede na maputol o ma-shortcut yung proseso. Otherwise, pag sinabi ni accused na not guilty, trial on the merits po yan. Depende po yan sa prosecutor. Ilang witnesses ang isasalang niya. Depende din yan sa defense kung ilang witnesses ang isasalang nila.
Attorney, meron ho kasing mga co-perpetrators na pinangalanan, ano? And nitong nakalipas na araw, lumabas ho itong mga pangalan po na ito. At dati, redacted ho yan, ano? Pero ngayon, sinapubliko na po yung mga pangalan. So, ano ho yung magiging partisipasyon nila dito sa proceedings? Kailangan bang hintayin din yung mga co-perpetrators at isa lang kasabay ho nitong main person na inaakusahan, attorney, o kaya naman ay separate ho sila? Papaano ho ang sistema? Lalo na kung nandun na sa trial proper, pero yung mga co-perpetrators nandun pa lang sa level na hinahanap pa ho sila at may mga apila pa sila and everything. So paano ho ito? Hindi magkasabay? Pwede ho ito? Ganun po ba?
Ang mangyayari po niyan, itong case ng former president will proceed independently as regards sa mga co-perpetrators po kasi yun nga, alam nga naman maghintayan pa yan. Hindi naman pwede. Meron namang severance of case, yun nga ang mangyayari. Nauna tong sa ex-president, kung malamang sa malamang kung magkataon na yung other co-perpetrators mag-voluntary appearance, pwedeng maipagsabay, pwede pang ihabol yung part 1, yung identification of suspect, and then part 2, confirmation of charges, and then part 3, yung trial of the merit. Pero parang yung senaryo na sinabi ko, malabo pang mangyari sa ngayon. Kasi yung mga co-perpetrators, wala pa namang jurisdiction ng ICC sa kanila. Mauuna talaga tong sa ex-president.
Yun, at least ganun ho yung aasahan at aabangan ng ating mga kabombo at mga Castar Nation na nakaantabay ho dito sa proceedings. Kasi itong ibang mga personalidad ho na pinangalanan bilang co-perpetrators, nakausap na ho namin yung ilan at kumbaga may mga hirit din sila, gusto nyo i-apila and kini-question, syempre that's a very basic na gagawin, ay kini-question ho yung jurisdiction nitong International Criminal Court. Pero ano ho ba ito ang paglalabas naman ho ng warrant of arrest against those persons? Ano ho ito, may time frame po ba sa paglalabas ng mandamiento de arresto para doon sa mga tinukoy na mga co-perpetrators, attorney?
Actually, sir, based sa research ko, yung application ng Office of the Prosecutor, confidential po yan. Mag-a-apply sila ng warrant of arrest sa pre-trial chamber, but they have to satisfy the judges with reasonable grounds to believe that this enumerated respondents are guilty and dapat sila managot and dapat may warrant of arrest. So, confidential po yan, puputok na lang yung warrant of arrest, yung physical copy, at that time na huhulihin na ng Interpol or other law enforcement organization yung suspect.
With that, maraming salamat po sa mga pagpapaliwanag niyan, Attorney Ram, at kami natutuwa na naliwanagan kami dito sa mga punto po na ito. Ito rin kasi yung madalas na tinatanong sa amin ng mga listeners and viewers po namin na nagpaparating ho ng mensahe, at kami nagagalak sa pagtugon po ninyo kahit ganitong oras, Attorney.
Yes, sir. You're welcome po.
Okay. Mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation, nakausap po natin si Attorney Rameses Victorious Gatchalian Villa Gonzalo, at yan ho ay may kinalaman doon sa mga proseso ng International Criminal Court. Isang eksperto sa mga batas sa international scene, mga kabombo, ang ating nakausap sa ngayon. Okay, sa pag-usad ho ng Bombo Network News Special Coverage ay kuha pa tayo ng mga karagdagang report, at kanina nga nababanggit namin ni Attorney Ram yung tungkol dun sa mga co-perpetrators na tinukoy ho ng panig ng prosekusyon dyan sa International Criminal Court. May mga hakbang din ho na ginagawa ang Department of Interior and Local Government para sa pag-monitor ng mga personalidad po na ito. Alamin natin sa ulat ni Bombo Bea Pinisa.
Bombo Dennis, kinumpirmaan ni Department of Interior and Local Government Secretary Juanito Victor John Vic Rimulya na patuloy lamang ang kanilang ahensya sa pag-trace sa mga personalidad na pinangalanan ng International Criminal Court na umano'y mga co-perpetrators ni dating Pangulo Rodrigo Duterte sa naging madugong war on drugs ng kanyang administrasyon. Sa isang pulong balitaan, sinabi ni Rimulya na bagamat may kaalaman sila hinggil sa mga personalidad na ito ay wala pang inihaing warrant of arrest laban sa mga co-perpetrators ng dating Pangulo, kaya naman wala pa anyang mga actionable document laban sa mga ito. Sa kabila nito, tuloy-tuloy lamang ang kanilang tracing sa mga personalidad na sangkot upang matiyak na kapag inilabas na ang mga kaukulang dokumento para sa kanilang pagkaka-aresto, ay mas magiging handaan niya ang kanilang tanggapan sa kung ano ang dapat nilang gagawin. So, ganyan, pakinggan natin ang tinig ni Secretary Juanito Victor John Vic Rimulya, ang kalihim ng Department of Interior and Local Government.
Are all aware na meron ng pinangalan ng co-conspirator. But wala pang warrant of arrest. So wala kaming actionable document. However, we are tracing the people already kung nasan sila. Those named, except for one na namatay na. But we are already tracing them kung nasan sila para in the event na kailangan, masanda na kami kung anong gagawin namin.
Sa kasalukuyan, Bombo Dennis, kinukuha pa ng Department of Interior and Local Government ang mga travel records at iba pang mga detalye hinggil sa mga pinangalanan ng mga individual. Inaasahan naman na makukuha ang mga naturang impormasyon ngayong linggo at nakatakdang i-anunsyo sa susunod na linggo kapag nakumpirma na ang mga detalyeng ito. So ngayon, pakinggan natin muli ang tinig ni Secretary Juanito Victor John Vic Rimulya, ang kalihim ng Department of Interior and Local Government.
We are getting all the records. We should have them by this week. I think 2 are abroad eh. 2 nasa Amerika. Pero makukuha at makukuha. Well, I'll get you the full details next week pag basta makuha ko na.
Samantala, ilan naman sa mga pinangalanan na sangkot sa madugong laban kontra droga ng nakaraang administrasyon ay sina Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo, Vitaliano Aguirre, Vicente Danao, Oscar Albayalde, Camilo Cascola na siyang pumanaw na, Dante Giran at Isidro La Peña. Sa ngayon, hinihinalang 2 sa mga ito ang nasa ibang bansa na sa kasalukuyan. Bombo Dennis.
Okay, Bombo Bea, para sa ikalilinaw lamang, papaano yung monitoring na ginagawa ng Department of Interior and Local Government knowing na wala naman na existing na warrant of arrest? So papaano yung kanilang ginagawang monitoring sa pagkakataong ito? Papaano nila ini-impose o kaya naman ay ina-actionan ng Department of Interior and Local Government?
Yes, Bombo Dennis, yung kanilang tracing ay nakabatay doon sa mga nakaraang mga lugar na kanilang pinaglagian habang nagpapatuloy itong mga pagsisiyasat ng International Criminal Court hinggil nga ito sa mga confirmation of charges ni dating Pangulo Rodrigo Duterte. Sa ngayon, ilan sa mga co-perpetrators nga ng dating Pangulo ang natukoy na nasa ibang bansa, which is yung dalawa nga dito sa mga pinangalanan ng International Criminal Court. Sa ngayon, yung ilan, kagaya ni Senator Bato de la Rosa na kasalukuyan pa rin hindi nagpapakita sa Senado, ay sumasailalim pa rin sa tracing kung saan binigyan din ni Remulla na nandito pa siya sa Pilipinas, partikular na sa Davao, no? Sa ngayon, kinukumpirma pa kung nasaan pa yung ibang perpetrators. And ito yung inihahanda lamang ng kalihim para kung sakali mang lumabas yung warrant of arrest ay agad na maaaresto ang mga personalidad na ito, Bombo Dennis.
Sige, with that, maraming salamat, Bombo Bea.
At iyan muna ang mga updates mula dito sa Quezon City. Ito si Bombo Bea Peniza. And this is Bombo Radio Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radio, Bombo!
Meron na lamang ho tayo natitirang 11 minuto bago sumapit ang ikapito ng gabi at inaasahan ang pag-usad pa nitong confirmation of charges hearing at yan mga kabomboy nakapaloob pa rin doon sa mga proseso ng International Criminal Court. And of course, yung atin hong mga kausap at mga sources from The Hague, may mga update din ho tayong natatanggap mula pa kanina kaugnay ho naman doon sa mga activities. Meron din ho kasi na mga magkakahiwalay na event, nagpapakita ng suporta yung mga pro-Duterte and meron din namang protesta yung mga anti-Duterte. And some of them are present doon ho sa mismong confirmation of charges hearing. Yun nga lang, limited space, limited lamang yung capacity para ho doon sa mga observer ng naturang kaso. In fact, nitong nakalipas na araw, ganun din ho yung naging sistema. Yun nga lang ay may pakiusap yung mga otoridad dyan sa International Criminal Court na iwasan ng pagpapakita o paglalahad ng emosyon upang hindi ho makaapekto doon sa mismong proceedings. At kagaya nga ng naitanong natin kanina kay Attorney Ram ay kung gaano nga ba yung kahigpit pagka magpapakita ng emosyon yung ilan sa mga halimbawa kaanak ko nung mga nasawi sa war on drugs campaign. Syempre hindi naman madali na kimkimin yun hong kanilang damdamin, pero yun nga ang kinakailangan ay hindi ho ito makaapekto doon sa nagpapatuloy na proseso ng International Criminal Court. Particular ho yung tinatawag na confirmation of charges hearing, mga kabombo at mga kastar nation. Ayan. At yan ay bahagi po ng mga paghihigpit bilang mga proseso ng International Criminal Court, mga kabombo. And of course, mga late tuners ho natin at yung mga kakabukas lamang ho ng kanilang Facebook Live o kaya naman ay Bombo Mobile app. Kayo ho ay nakatunghay dito sa ating special coverage ng mga kaganapan sa The Hague dyan sa Netherlands, kung saan ho ay ikalawang araw na ho ito ng confirmation of charges hearing para sa kasong crimes against humanity against the former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte at ito ho ay binubuo ng 4 na araw. Pero ito ho yung pangalawa. Pero bukas ay mag-skip ho sila ng isang araw and then mag-resume sa araw ho ng Huwebes. At ganun din sa araw ho ng Biyernes, itutuloy ho itong confirmation of charges. And then later on, ang pre-trial chamber ay maglalabas ho ng kanilang pasya kung uusad ba yung kaso against the former President of the Philippines o kaya naman ay tuloy na ho itong tutuldukan kung wala ho silang makikitang merito para naman umusad pa sa next level, ika nga yung naturang reklamo laban sa dating presidente ng ating bansa. Kanina mga kabombo, mga kastar nation, nahimay ho yung ilan sa mga mismong mga pahayag na inilabas ni former President Duterte sa ilang mga pagkakataon. Kagaya ho, nung kanyang mga talumpati, nung kanyang pagdalo sa mga gatherings ay kinuha po bilang parte ng ebidensya ng panig ng prosekusyon yung naturang mga pahayag. Pero kahapon, ang panig ho ng depensa ay naglahad din ng kanilang panig at sinabi na yung mga sinasabi ng former president ay pagpapakita ng tapang upang mapigilan yung paglaganap ng krimen at hindi raw ito isang uri ng krimen kung natatakot yung mga kriminal, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. So iyon po yung panig nitong si Nicolas Kaufman, ang lead counsel ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Bagay na pinuri naman ng mga Filipino lawyers na nandun para suportahan ang former President. Kagaya ho nila Attorney Alfredo Lim Jr. at ganun din ni Attorney Silvestre Bebot Bello III na dati rin hong Labor Secretary, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. So, todo papuri ho sila dun sa malinaw umano na pagkakalahad nitong si Kaufman. Pero as of now, hindi pa ho nagbibigay ng pahayag yung panig ng depensa. At yan ay para naman sa panig ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Hinihintay pa ho natin, mga kabombo, yung pagkakataon ay pagkakaloob sa kanila para sila naman o yung kanilang panig naman ang maglahad ng mga sentimento o kaya naman ay punto na nais nilang ilahad dyan ho sa mga huwes na siyang humahawak nito pong kaso po na ito. And sinusubukan din ho natin, mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, na makipag-ugnayan dito pa sa mga personalidad na napangalanan. Doon sa kani-kanina ay naibalita ho natin yung tungkol sa aligasyon ng suhulan sa International Criminal Court prosecutors. At milyon-milyon yung inaakusa na sinasabi ho na isinuhol ng ilang personalidad para doon sa pag-usad ng kaso nitong si former President Rodrigo Duterte dyan sa International Criminal Court. Mga investigator, yung nagtungo dito sa ating bansa, and kabilang doon sa aligasyon ay sagot daw yung board and lodging at lahat ng mga kinakailangan, at tinukoy nga si former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV bilang isa doon sa mga personalidad na may kinalaman daw doon sa naturang issue ng suhulan. Bagay na kinontra naman itong si Trillanes at naglabas na ho siya ng pahayag na magsasampa siya ng kaso against doon sa 18 Marines o former Marine soldiers at dito kay Attorney Levito Baligod, pati na dito kay dating Representative Mike Defensor, mga kabombo. So antabayanan ho natin ang iba pang mga development hinggil dyan. Kuha muna tayo ng mga karagdagang report mula sa ating news team. Alamin natin, mga kabombo, sa monitoring at observation ng ating hong coverage team, si Bombo Genesis Racho muna. Kunin natin, Bombo Gen, please come in.
Bombo Dennis, mga kabombo Kastar Nation, habang hinihintay natin itong pagpasok ng second session ng day 2 ng confirmation of charges hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, ibahagi lamang natin itong pananaw ng Victims Council, itong si Attorney Colmenares na isa sa mga sumama sa mga biktima ng drug war doon sa May Dahig at makikibahagi doon sa hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Natanong kasi si Attorney Colmenares, Bombo Dennis, before nag-start itong trial kanina or itong hearing kanina, at nababanggit niya na napaka-off tangent yung argumento nitong si Attorney Nicolas Kaufman kagabi. Hinihintay natin ngayon yung posibleng paglabas pa ni Attorney Kaufman ng kanyang mga argumento muli. Pero ang sabi nitong si Attorney Colmenares, isa sa mga batikang human rights lawyer ng Pilipinas, ay hindi katanggap-tanggap yung mga argumentong binitawan ni Attorney Kaufman kagabi, lalo na yung pagbanggit sa pangalan ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at kasama na dito yung ibinabato kay Pangulong Marcos na hindi raw niya tinutupad yung kanyang mga statement, mga pangako kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Balikan natin na, Bombo Dennis, yung maikling pahayag ni Attorney Colmenares ngayong araw nito.
Masaya din kami doon sa punto na walang kinalaman sa kaso yun. Kung totoo man, halimbawa, naprubahan nilang totoo man na nangako si President Marcos na hindi siya mag-cooperate sa ICC, and in the end, nag-cooperate pala siya. Anong connection mo sa kaso? Ang kaso ay may mga namatay, pinatay mo ba? Inutos mo ba? Kahit pa nag-break ng word si President Marcos, hindi yan i-consider ng ICC na relevant na ebidensya. Actually, parang ano yun parang narrative lang yan ng mga supporters ni President Duterte. Pero sa legal, medyo para sa akin, mahina yun. Kasi hindi mo talaga sinasagot ang tanong. In fact, sa Pilipinas, ang tawag nga dyan, negative pregnant. Sa law, negative pregnant, parang may pag-amin ka as well. Parang may denial ka na actually inaamin mo. So yun ang negative pregnant. Kung sinabing pinatay mo siya ng Miyerkules, pinatay mo siya, ang sasabihin mo, hindi ko siya pinatay ng Miyerkules. So parang inaamin mo na ng Martes, di ba? So yun ang negative pregnant dyan. Kaya parang labas na sa issue ng korte ang trend ng depensa kahapon. At kami para sa amin, magandang pangitain yon kasi parang wala ngang ebidensyang maipresenta si President Duterte para sabihin wala siyang kinalaman sa drug war at hindi niya alam ang nangyayaring patayan sa drug war.
Bahagi yan na Bombo Dennis, mga kabukas na nation, no? Nung maikling pahayag ni Attorney Colmenares bago siya pumasok doon sa Justice Hall sa may International Criminal Court. So parang sabi niya, isang magandang pangitain na hindi na off tangent yung mga argumento nitong si Attorney Kaufman na kagabi dito sa pagpresenta nila ng kanilang claims, Bombo Dennis, mga kabombo. So antabayanan pa rin natin kung ano yung magiging ipapresenta rin ng defense panel ngayong araw na ito o ngayong gabing ito habang nagpapatuloy itong ikalawang araw ng confirmation of charges hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Mamaya, balik pa rin tayo, Bombo Dennis, sa ilan pang mga obserbasyon. Back to you, Bombo Dennis.
Ayan, maraming salamat, Bombo Genesis Racho. Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, tayo ay patuloy na nakasubaybay dito sa mga kaganapan sa International Criminal Court and nakantabay ho tayo sa resumption nitong pagdinig ng International Criminal Court. Ito ho yung ikalawang araw, day 2, ika nga, no, ng confirmation of charges hearing para sa kasong kinakaharap ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. And of course, para sa ating mga late tuners, mga kabombo, hanggang mamaya pa ho ito, mga kabombo, no? Hanggang around 10:30 evening at tayo ho ay advance ng 7 oras doon sa Dahig. Ibig sabihin, hapon ho sa kanila sa mga pagkakataong ito, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. At ang temperatura ay naglalaro ho sa pagitan ng 8 hanggang 10 na antas ng sentigrado, ano? Malamig yan kung para dito sa ating mga kababayan sa Pilipinas. Pero para doon ho sa kanila, medyo mainit na yan o kaya ay normal na yan. Ano? Yung temperatura na 9 hanggang 10 degrees Celsius. Habang dito ho sa atin, ang temperatura naman ay nasa 20 degrees Celsius and above. No? At yan ay kaugnay ho ng ating sitwasyon. Yung heat island effect kasi nakakaapekto, mga kabombo, ay doon talaga likas na malamig ho dyan sa bahagi ng Netherlands. Kaya yan yung isa sa sinasabi na konsiderasyon, ano? Kagaya nga ng binabanggit ni Attorney Bebot Bello na para sa isang kagaya ni former President Rodrigo Duterte na manatili sa isang bansa na napakalamig ng temperatura ay malaking kumbaga negatibo ang epekto sa katawan, lalo't hindi naman ito nasanay sa malamig na temperatura. Dahil tayo dito sa Pilipinas ay tropical country at ngayon ay humaharap sa araw-araw na malamig na temperatura dyan sa Dahig ang former president. But of course, meron naman ho mga heater at mga facilities ang International Criminal Court para ho dun sa mga detainee, kabilang na ho si former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. At mamaya, mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, alamin ho natin ang mga karagdagang banggit ng panig naman itong depensa. Kasi sa panig ho ng prosekusyon, kahapon ay humarap itong si Attorney Butuyan, Joel Butuyan, ating kababayan, and today ang humarap naman ay itong prosecutor na si Edward Jeremy at may iba pa ho mga personalidad na haharap para maglahad ng kanilang panig. Kaya lang inaasahan ho natin na mamaya yung panig naman ng depensa maglalahad ng kanilang mga argumento, no? Para ho dito sa confirmation of charges hearing. Okay. Okay, kuha muna tayo ng mga karagdagan report dyan ho sa bahagi ng Mindanao. Mga reaksyon pa rin ng atin hong mga kababayan, mga kabombo ho natin, mga ka-Star Nation dyan sa iba't ibang dako, lalo na sa parte ho ng Mindanao. Makibalita tayo sa mga obserbasyon. Tinutukan yan ng Bombo Radyo Cagayan.
Itinuring na isang makasaysayang kaganapan ni retired Judge Lorenzo Balo ang kasong hinaharap ni former President Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court o ICC sa The Hague, Netherlands. Ayon sa kanya, ito ang kauna-unahang kaso laban sa isang dating Pangulo ng Pilipinas at may malaking kahalagahan sa mga Pilipino, lalo na sa Mindanao. Ipinaliwanag ni retired Judge Balo sa panayam ng Bombo Radyo Cagayan na makasaysayan ng proseso dahil si Duterte ang kauna-unahang Asyanong dinala sa International Criminal Court upang harapin ang crimes against humanity. Binigyan din niya na ito ay isang pribilehiyo para sa mga Pilipino na masaksihan ang itong makasaysayang kaganapan. Ipinaliwanag din niya ang proseso ng ICC sa confirmation of charges na katumbas ng preliminary investigation sa lokal ng korte sa Pilipinas. Sa ICC, 3 hukom ang nagsusuri kung may substantial grounds para ituloy pa ang kaso at hilingin ang trial. Ayon kay Balo, nararapat na sumailalim si Duterte sa trial upang malinawan kung may sala o wala ang lahat ng akusasyon laban sa kanya. Hinikayat din ng dating hukom ang parehong pro at anti-Duterte na maging open-minded at positibo at ipangibabaw ang kapakanan ng mga Pilipino sa kanilang paghuhusga. Aniya, mahalaga na ang pambansang interes ang pangunahing priority sa kabila ng matinding opinyon o panig ng bawat isa. Para sa mga taga Mindanao, mahalaga nga itong perspektibo dahil nakikita nila ang epekto ng katarungan sa pambansang antas at kung paano na iuugnay ang proseso sa prinsipyo ng due process na ipinapatupad sa buong mundo.
Historical event nga involved ang past president, the only Asian president nga sa ICC for crimes against humanity.
Yan ang ulat nga rito sa Bombo Radyo Cagayan. Ito si Bombo Donald Pitogan. This is Bombo Radyo Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radyo. Bombo!
5 minuto na mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, makalipas ho ang alas 7 ng gabi at nagpapatuloy pa rin tayo sa pag-antabay dito sa mga kaganapan sa ikalawang araw ng confirmation of charges hearing. Kanina ho sa ating interview kay Attorney Ram ay nabanggit ho yung ilan sa mga proseso, no? At atin naman ho itong nauobserbahan. So tuloy na ho tayo sa pagtutok dyan sa International Criminal Court.
My name is Robin Croft, and I address 2 topics today. First, I will present the contextual elements of humanity. Second, I will set of the prosecution's evidence to Duterte's individual responsibility for what's alleged in this case. First, then, to the contextual. Your Honours, the contextual elements against humanity published in this case because, first, there was an attack against the civilian population in the Philippines. The attack targeted civilians alleged to be involved in
and other forms of criminality. The Rome Statute crimes alleged in this case formed part of that attack. Second, the attack was widespread and systematic. And third, the attack was carried out pursuant to or in furtherance of a state or organizational policy. This policy was to neutralize alleged criminals in the Philippines through violent crimes, including murder. The evidence establishing the contextual elements are set out in paragraphs 71 to 86 of our pre-confirmation brief. In relation to the requirement of an attack, our case is that from at least the 1st of November 2011 to the 16th of March 2019, the Davao Death Squad, or DDS, and/or the National Network carried out an attack which targeted civilians alleged to be criminals. Your Honours have heard from my colleagues how from 2011 until 2016, the attack was concentrated in Davao City. Then, in 2016, when Mr. Duterte became president, he and his co-perpetrators expanded the attack nationwide. They used the national network to do this, which, as Mr. Jeremy has explained, was comprised of state actors, such as law enforcement personnel, as well as non-police assets and hitmen. Your Honours, the locations of the murders contained in counts 1 to 3 of our document containing the charges are indicated on the map on your screens. They include 76 murders, which themselves satisfy the threshold of multiple acts making up a course of conduct. However, as Mr. Nichols has noted, the crimes in count 1 to 3 are representative and emblematic of a larger killing campaign. And the prosecution relies on a range of evidence to establish that the attack was made up of thousands of killings and other violent crimes under Article 7.1. This evidence includes datasets and the statements of documentation actors, the evidence of insider witnesses, expert analysis, and the admissions of Philippine state agencies in their public reporting. I will take your honours through some of this evidence now. During Mr. Duterte's mayoral period, hundreds of civilians alleged to be criminals were killed in Davao City. On your screens is a chart with data on extrajudicial killings in Davao based on public reporting. The data is recorded at tab 116. It shows that between 2012 and 2015, there are at least 274 extrajudicial killings in Davao City. This data is corroborated by DDS insider witnesses. Several DDS witnesses say that they each killed hundreds of alleged criminals while with the DDS. Your Honours can see on this slide quotes from one DDS witness. They estimate that, I quote, between 1,500 and 2,000 people, end quote, are buried at Laud Quarry. The quarry was only one of several places that the DDS dumped bodies in and around Davao. That's at tab 37. This witness said that they personally killed hundreds of people. They described their job as the DDS as being, quote, just to kill small criminals, petty criminals. Out of the almost 300 people that I have killed, I never actually got to kill a drug lord, end quote. That's at tab 34. This witness's words make it clear that the target of the attack was people alleged to be criminals in Davao. Your Honours, another DDS witness who also killed hundreds of people said that the DDS targeted, I quote, suspected criminals in Davao City, including shabu users and pushers, end quote. That's at tab 58. Your Honours, as you have heard previously, Mr. Duterte has himself publicly admitted that he killed around 1,700 people while he was mayor of Davao City. I quote, they say I killed 700, they undercounted, around 1,700, end quote. That's at tabs 10, 10.1, 10.2. This evidence, the data collected by independent organisations, the statements of insiders on the hundreds of people that they have each killed, and Mr. Duterte's own admission of having killed 1,700 people while mayor of Davao, all show that the attack was widespread in the mayoral period. And the attack continued to be widespread after Mr. Duterte became president, when it expanded across the country. The victimisation expanded, with the hundreds killed during the mayoral period becoming thousands in the presidential period. Your Honours can see a map of the Philippines on the slide. The colours which will emerge show the locations and density of the killings in the anti-illegal drug campaign. Purple dots indicate an area with 1 to 10 killings, while yellow indicates 500 killings. This is how the killings progressed throughout the presidential period. Your Honours, this map is based on data collected by an independent organisation which recorded at least 5,823 anti-drug killings during the presidential period. This data is recorded at tab 104. The data shows that the attack during the presidential period was widespread. As Your Honours can see from the map, it occurred across the country. It occurred over multiple years, and thousands of civilians were killed. Mr. Duterte's administration effectively admitted to the large volume of the attack. They admitted that thousands of individuals were killed in anti-drug operations while Mr. Duterte was president. For example, in the Duterte administration's 2017 year-end report, which you can see on your screens, the administration admitted that 3,967 drug personalities died in anti-drug operations in the first year and a half of Mr. Duterte's presidency. That's at tab 106. Similarly, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, or PDEA, admitted that 5,281 drug personalities died in anti-drug operations in the first 2.5 years of Mr. Duterte's presidency. This is at tab 98. These admissions corroborate the widespread nature of the attack. They show that thousands of individuals were killed. Your Honours, in addition to being widespread, the attack was also systematic from its origins and throughout the charge period. The features of DDS operations demonstrate this systematicity during the mayoral period. And these features can be found in our brief at paragraphs 35 to 36 and 88 to 98. Insider witnesses described how time and time again, killing operations followed the system set out on the screen. The same hierarchical structure was followed. As Mr. Nichols explained, the orders flowed from Mr. Duterte at the top, through a combination of other co-perpetrators, to the handler of the relevant DDS team, and finally to the physical perpetrators at the bottom. The DDS teams composed of police and non-police assets and hitmen who carried out the killings. The features of the killings were also often markedly similar. The identity or whereabouts of the victim was provided to the DDS by an informant. The perpetrators would frequently arrive to or flee the crime scene by motorcycle. They shot or stabbed their victims at close range. The victims were targeted on the basis that they were alleged to be drug users, pushers, or other criminals. And the DDS received a sum of reward money for each kill. When the attack expanded during the presidential period, it continued to be systematic because it remained highly organised, planned, and coordinated. Similar systems to the one I've just described in Davao were deployed during Mr. Duterte's presidency to implement the killings. Your Honours can see some of those features listed on your screens. As in Davao, victims were targeted on the basis that they were alleged to be drug users, pushers, or other criminals. The process for killing the targets was often markedly similar. First, the victims were identified by state actors as targets and listed. As Mr. Jeremy has outlined, high-value targets were often listed on the PRRD list. The targets of barangay clearance operations were often listed on local drug lists, such as local police station lists. Second, targets were killed in the context of so-called law enforcement operations. Police often tried to legitimise the operations, so they would stage a nanlaban or fight-back scenario to make them to appear to have been in self-defence. They would also plant evidence, such as drugs and guns, on the victims' bodies. And third, as in Davao, police and those working with them were often paid reward money per kill. Your Honours, these killings were not random or coincidental. Quite the opposite. Targets were pre-identified, listed, and then subject to operations based on that list. This clearly demonstrates the systematicity of the attack. Your Honours, the last point I would like to make about the attack relates to the evidence of an expert witness who specialises in political violence in the Philippines. This expert analysed data relating to armed encounters between the PNP and supposedly armed suspects. He compared data from before Mr. Duterte's presidency to during. And based on this comparison, he found that in the first 25 months of Mr. Duterte's presidency, the number of suspects killed by police increased by 590% across the Philippines. And that finding is at tab 68. Your Honours have heard Mr. Jeremy speak about Bulacan, a province immediately north of Metro Manila, where Mr. Duterte praised the killing of 32 civilians in police operations in 24 hours. The expert witness found that in Bulacan, police killings rose by 1,600% when Mr. Duterte became president, and that's at tab 121. The expert also compared data on Bulacan Police's use of deadly force to other countries and cities across the world. He used the metric of police killings per 100,000 population. The chart on your screens shows this comparison, which is at tab 121 again. The data on Bulacan is orange, while other countries and cities are blue. The orange bar on the left shows police use of deadly force in Bulacan before Mr. Duterte became president. You can see that with a fatality rate of over 1, it was already comparatively high. The orange bar on the right shows the dramatic increase in killings in Bulacan by police after Mr. Duterte became president. The expert concluded that, quote, the only plausible explanation for such an extreme ratio is a widespread policy of extrajudicial executions, end quote. That's also tab 121. Your Honours, this leads us to the policy requirement for crimes against humanity in Article 7. Your Honours, the attack in this case was carried out pursuant to a policy to neutralise alleged criminals through violent crimes, including murder. The policy was also known as the Davao Formula or model. Your Honours have heard about the origins of the policy in Davao City and how it was implemented by the local executive government. Mr. Nichols explained how Mr. Duterte, when Mayor of Davao City, established the Davao Death Squad to carry out the policy and kill criminals. The evidence establishing the state or organisational policy in this case is set out at paragraphs 77 to 84 of our brief. As the policy and the common plan were both to neutralise alleged criminals via violent crimes, there is some overlap between the evidence on each. I will set out some of that evidence now while discussing the policy, and then some later while discussing the common plan. The evidence includes Mr. Duterte's many public statements and speeches outlining the policy. It also includes the Command Memorandum Circular, which Mr. Jeremy mentioned earlier, witness accounts, speeches and statements by other co-perpetrators, sorry, the high level of coordination between state actors, sorry, Your Honours. I will start with Mr. Duterte's own speeches. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte made no secret of the policy, as is shown by the references in our brief to his many speeches outlining the policy. He made these speeches as Mayor of Davao as a presidential candidate, and then as President of the Philippines. One example of a speech that Mr. Duterte made as mayor was at a meeting on peace and order in Davao in October 2015. That is tab 13.
Eight hours yung mga nagdi-distribute ng droga sa Boulevard. Giving you 48 hours. Pag nakita ako kayo, papatayin ko kayo dito.
These are Mr. Duterte's own words. I quote, "I will kill you. That's the only formula that worked in my city." End quote. That is tab 133.
Prangka-prangkahan talaga. I will kill you. Kayong na mayor ako ngayon, presidente, yun din ang, that's the only formula that worked in my city.
Your Honours will recall that yesterday, Mr. Nichols played a series of Mr. Duterte's presidential campaign speeches. I want to take a moment to reflect on some of the key features of those speeches, which are at tabs 8, 12 and 14. First, Mr. Duterte frequently said that if elected as president, he would stop drugs and crime in the Philippines in 3 to 6 months. He frequently referenced his experience in Davao, where he admitted that he had killed criminals. He said that if elected, he would order the military and police to do the same nationwide. And he expressly stated that this would entail killing. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte's speeches make it clear that there was a policy to neutralise alleged criminals by violent means, including murder. And Mr. Duterte was not the only member of the Common Plan who disseminated the policy through public speeches and statements. In this video at tab 9, co-perpetrator Mr. De La Rosa addresses a crowd of self-confessed drug addicts in Bacolod City and urges them to kill drug lords and burn their houses.
But on Thursday, National Police Chief Ronald De La Rosa's rhetorics were far from toned down, as he told hundreds of self-confessed drug users and pushers in Bacolod City to kill drug lords.
Mr. De La Rosa made this speech on the 25th of August 2016. At the time, he was the chief of the Philippine National Police. Your Honours, the existence of the policy is also shown by the police directive which Mr. Jeremy spoke about earlier, Command Memorandum Circular number 16 of 2016. This is at tab 112. As Your Honours have heard, the day after Mr. Duterte became president, he appointed his longtime friend and colleague from Davao, his co-perpetrator, Mr. Ronald De La Rosa, as chief of the Philippine National Police. On the same day, Mr. De La Rosa formalised the anti-drugs component of the policy by issuing this directive to the 180,000 police officers under his command. The circular directed police to pursue the neutralisation of illegal drug personalities. As Mr. Jeremy has outlined, the evidence shows that within law enforcement, neutralise meant and was understood as meaning to kill. Your Honours, the Command Memorandum Circular shows there was a policy to neutralise through violent crimes such as murder. I will now turn to part 2 of my presentation on Mr. Duterte's individual criminal responsibility. The prosecution's evidence on this is set out at paragraphs 5 to 70 of our brief. The prosecution alleges that Mr. Duterte indirectly co-perpetrated the crimes, ordered and/or induced the crimes, and/or aided and abetted the crimes. Today, in the interest of time, I will focus on indirect co-perpetration, and we rely on our brief for the other modes of liability. Your Honours, Mr. Duterte is an indirect co-perpetrator of the alleged crimes because first, he agreed to a common plan to neutralise alleged criminals. Second, he and his fellow co-perpetrators jointly controlled a structure of power, namely the Davao Death Squad and the National Network, which they used to pursue the common plan. Third, Mr. Duterte made an essential contribution to the crimes within the framework of the common plan. And fourth, he did this with the requisite intent. Your Honours can see on your screens an excerpt from paragraph 4 of our document containing the charges. This sets out the scope of the common plan. The plan was to neutralise alleged criminals in the Philippines, including those perceived or alleged to be associated with drug use, sale or production through violent crimes, including murder. As Mr. Nichols has explained, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators agreed to this plan in Davao City. Photos of the co-perpetrators in Davao City are displayed on your screens. They're a combination of trusted police officers, an individual from Mr. Duterte's mayoral office, an officer from the National Bureau of Investigation in Davao Region, and a lawyer who acted on behalf of certain members of the Davao Death Squad. In 2016, when Mr. Duterte became president, the members of the Common Plan remained largely the same. They were joined by a further 2 individuals, a senior police officer and a long-time colleague of the group from Davao City, who had worked with the DDS before the jurisdictional period. I will take your honours through some of the evidence which shows both the scope of the common plan and the co-perpetrators' agreement to it. In the interest of time, I will address some co-perpetrators and we rely on our brief for the rest. That's at paragraphs 9 to 23 of our brief. On your screens is a photograph of Mr. Ronald De La Rosa. When Mr. De La Rosa was Davao City Police Chief, he developed Tokhang operations. As your honours have heard from Mr. Jeremy, Tokhang was a blueprint for police to implement killings later in the presidential period. When he was announced as Mr. Duterte's chosen PMP chief in May 2016, Mr. De La Rosa gave this interview, which is at tab 101. It shows that he wholeheartedly agreed to the common plan.
Patayan sa drugs. Patayan talaga ito sa drugs. Kaya kayong mga drug lord dyan, humanda na kayo at talagang sasagasaan ko kayo.
On this slide is a photo of Isidro La Peña. Like Mr. De La Rosa, Mr. La Peña was well known to Mr. Duterte because he too had worked as Davao City Police Chief. In his case, from 1996 until 1998. In 2016, Mr. Duterte appointed Mr. La Peña as Director General of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, or PDEA. PDEA is the lead anti-drug enforcement agency in the Philippines. 2 days after Mr. La Peña took his oath, he gave a speech to his PDEA subordinates. There is an excerpt from that speech on the slide. Quote, "Under then Mayor, we implemented strict law enforcement against illegal drug activities in Davao City. The President wants to replicate and expand what is being done in Davao. And that is precisely what I intend to do." End quote. That's tab 101. Also like Mr. De La Rosa, Vicente Danao was Davao City Police Chief during the mayoral period, in his case from 2013 to 2016. In November 2018, he was appointed Police Chief of Manila Police District, and he told reporters, quote, "If I discover anyone involved in drugs, especially those who distribute or just throw them around, son of a bitch, I will go after you, goddamn. I will kill you. Blatantly, I am saying that. Sons of bitches." End quote. That's tab 96. When Mr. Duterte became president, he appointed Vitaliano Aguirre II as Secretary of Justice. Mr. Aguirre has also publicly acknowledged the common plan and his agreement to it as a member of Mr. Duterte's administration.
Well, which do you want? We build first. Do we build the prison facilities first, or do we go against these people? Choose. If you're in the Philippines, we will choose to kill these drug lords.
Quote, "In the Philippines, we will choose to kill these drug lords." End quote. That's tab 125. Your Honours, these speeches of co-perpetrators show both the scope of the common plan and those co-perpetrators' agreement to it. Your Honours, the next element of indirect co-perpetration is control of a structure of power. In the mayoral period, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators controlled the DDS, which they used to pursue the common plan. There is a diagram of the DDS hierarchy on your screens. As the mayor of Davao City, Mr. Duterte sat at the apex of the formal and city structures. The law gave him formal operational, supervision and control over the police in Davao City. In addition to this de jure power, insider witnesses spoke about his de facto power over police and the DDS structure. Under Mr. Duterte were a combination of co-perpetrators from the Davao City Police Office and the Mayor's Office. Together with Mr. Duterte, they controlled the DDS teams beneath them. They controlled the will of the DDS perpetrators through a range of mechanisms. And these are set out in paragraph 38 of our brief and include threats to kill and actual killing. To illustrate this control, there are quotes from one witness on your screen. This witness said that when he was first told to kill, he did not want to. But, I quote, "I felt like I didn't have any other choice but to follow their orders. Duterte is the most powerful person in Davao City, and you had to do what he wanted. It wasn't possible not to not obey his command." End quote. This is tab 51. When Mr. Duterte became president, the co-perpetrators continued to control a structure of power. One of the first things that Mr. Duterte did with his new presidential powers was to appoint his co-perpetrators from Davao to national positions in government and law enforcement, which were key to the common plan. And after he appointed Mr. De La Rosa as chief of the PMP, Mr. De La Rosa used his new powers to move other police co-perpetrators into key policing roles. These new appointments expanded the geographic powers of the co-perpetrators and allowed them to create a larger network of individuals they controlled. Your Honours can see that structure of power on the chart on your screens. The co-perpetrators controlled the executive, they controlled the police, they controlled the Drug Enforcement Agency, the National Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Justice. And they used this control to ensure that their subordinates carried out the plan to neutralise alleged criminals through violent crimes. For example, as PMP chief, Mr. De La Rosa now controlled some 180,000 police officers, who, as you have heard, he directed to neutralise drug personalities. Mr. La Peña now controlled 1,800 Philippine drug enforcement personnel. They used these subordinates as physical perpetrators to commit the crimes. Mr. Aguirre, as Secretary of Justice, now had control of the National Prosecution Service. He used this control to ensure that, except for a handful of low-level perpetrators in notorious cases, the crimes were not prosecuted, and a climate of impunity prevailed. And the co-perpetrators controlled the will of the physical perpetrators. As in Davao City, low-level members of the national network risked losing their jobs or being killed if they did not comply. For example, Your Honours can see the evidence of a police insider on your screens. He said that if his boss did not kill enough people during police operations, he would lose his post and be replaced. I quote, "We were told that there should be 5 to 10 deaths per month. The regional director called him and told him that if there were no deaths or no recorded killings, then he would be relieved of his duty." End quote. That's tab 124. Now on your screens is the evidence of an individual who police suspected of involvement in drugs. He surrendered to police to avoid being killed. The police held his status as an alleged drug pusher against him and recruited him as an asset. They made him kill other civilians who were alleged to be involved with drugs. He said, quote, "I surrendered myself to them. I knew that they wanted to kill me, so I became an asset of theirs." End quote. That's at tab 22. Your Honours, I will now turn to the requirement of an essential contribution. Mr. Duterte made an essential contribution to the crimes within the framework of the Common Plan. And the prosecution has set out 10 of Mr. Duterte's contributions in our brief at paragraphs 44 to 58. Many of these have been discussed in the prosecution's presentations. For example, Mr. Nichols spoke about how Mr. Duterte designed and disseminated the policy in this case, which is point A on the slide. He also spoke about point B, how Mr. Duterte established and oversaw the DDS. I have just addressed point E, on the appointment of key personnel to positions which were crucial to the execution of the crimes. Mr. Jeremy has spoken about point J, how Mr. Duterte publicly named so-called high-value targets who were then killed. And all members of the prosecution have touched upon point H, Mr. Duterte's public statements authorising, condoning and encouraging killing. Your Honours, without Mr. Duterte's essential contribution, the crimes in this case would not have been committed, or they would have been committed in a significantly different way. We can see this in the evidence of low-level members of the Davao Death Squad and the National Network, who said that Mr. Duterte's conduct had a causal effect on their perpetration of the crimes. You can see on your on the screens, one low-level perpetrator during the mayoral period said, I quote, "I was confident to continue killing people because anyway, we wouldn't be arrested for that." End quote. That's tab 38. A low-level police perpetrator during the presidential period was asked about the impact Mr. Duterte's public speeches had on his team, including when deciding to kill someone. He responded, quote, "It did have an effect on me because it's like I was saying to myself, well, even the president, he himself is ready to do something like this, and who am I?" End quote. That's tab 142. A senior police officer during the presidential period was asked why his police unit started killing in July 2016. He responded, I quote, "Because of the directive of the president," end quote. That's tab 120. Your Honours, from everything you have heard over the past 2 days, there can be no doubt about Mr. Duterte's knowledge and intent. Mr. Duterte meant to engage in the conduct that has been charged in this case. He intended that the crimes would be committed, and he was aware that they would be committed as a result of implementing the common plan. Mr. Duterte knew about the fundamental features of the Davao Death Squad and the national network that enabled the co-perpetrators to control the physical perpetrators. And he was aware of the factual circumstances that enabled the co-perpetrators to control the crimes. Mr. Duterte knew because he himself established the DDS to kill people. He repeatedly broadcast his intention to implement the common plan nationally if elected president. He made it clear that this would involve killing. Once he was president, he moved his trusted co-perpetrators from Davao into key national positions. And as the number of killings rose, Mr. Duterte persisted with the common plan. He praised the 32 killings in a one-time big-time operation in Bulacan. He publicly named so-called high-value targets. He promised to protect police. And as Your Honours have heard, Mr. Duterte has admitted to many of these things. Your Honours, I will conclude my presentation by recalling 2 items. The first is Mr. Duterte's presidential campaign promise that he would stop drugs and crime in the Philippines within 3 to 6 months. And the second is the spread of killings during the first 6 months of Mr. Duterte's presidency.
I promise you, hindi naman believe yung ibang tao. Sabi ko, I would stop drugs and crime, criminality in 3 to 6 months.
That concludes the prosecution's submissions on the merits. Thank you, Your Honours.
Josh Motach. Thank you very much. Am I to understand that you have finished with the presentations on the merits?
Yes, that is correct.
You know that you still have some time, right?
Hopefully been efficient, and we have finished now. Thank you.
Donc maintenant, je donne...
Now, I'll give the floor to the legal representatives of the victims for their submissions on the merits. You have the floor. Thank you, Madam President. Our presentation shall be in 2 parts. I will start with my presentation, and my colleague Andres will conclude later on. And just to be sure, I have 30 minutes. Is that correct? Answer correct. Thank you.
Madam President, Your Honours, we speak today on behalf of thousands of victims and surviving families who have suffered immeasurable harm under the so-called anti-drug campaign conducted during the administration of a suspect, former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. We speak for families who cannot be here, mothers who buried their sons, children who lost their parents, the spouses who now raise families alone, and communities that have lived for years under fear and silence and that continue to bear the consequences of violence that swept through their neighborhoods like a storm. These victims appear today before you not as mere statistics or distant figures or images in report as pictured yesterday by the defense, but as human beings whose rights under the Rome Statute have been violated in the most profound ways. These proceedings relate to what has been labeled the Duterte's war on drugs and Duterte's bloody war on drugs. However, the campaign, as I will refer to it during my presentation, was less about combating the drug trade itself and more about policing poverty and social inequality. As the evidence on the record unequivocally shows, individuals targeted by Mr. Duterte anti-drug operations overwhelmingly came from impoverished communities where social mobility is limited and opportunities are scarce. Drug use, particularly methamphetamine, locally known as shabu, is often more prevalent in such low-income settings where people may turn to substances as a coping mechanism for their harsh living conditions. In these communities, structural conditions, including the absence of adequate mental health services, limited access to quality education, scarce employment opportunities, and the chronic stress associated with poverty, create an environment in which substance use is more likely to emerge. Therefore, patterns of drug use do not arise in a vacuum. They reflect deeper systemic inequalities and long-standing patterns of socioeconomic marginalization. The campaign disproportionately affected the poor and marginalized, especially in urban informal settlements marked by high levels of poverty. While the rhetoric of war focused on eradicating drug dealers and users, it was the most vulnerable members of society, those with the least power and resources, were caught in the crossfire. A significant number of the ones killed had little or no criminal history and were often accused of minor drug-related conduct or perceived drug use by the authorities. These were people living in poverty, were treated as expendable by a system that failed to prioritize their protection and to address the structural conditions underlying their struggles. Rather than addressing the root causes of drug addiction, such as poverty, lack of education, unemployment, and inequality, the Duterte administration framed the issue as a criminal one, focusing on punitive enforcement over social responses. Mr. Duterte's response was a selective, violent crackdown of the most vulnerable, recasting conditions of marginalizations as grounds for criminal targeting, rather as manifestations of social injustice. Framed on its face as a campaign against illegal drugs, it in reality reflected broader social political dynamics, including the targeting of marginalized communities, the use of state violence, and the deflection of attention from deeper structural problems. Mr. Duterte is charged under Article 7(1)(a) of the Rome Statute with the crimes against humanity of murder and attempted murder, allegedly committed between 1st November 2011 and 16 March 2019 in or around Davao City during the period in which he was mayor of a town, and across the Republic of the Philippines during his term as president of a country. The prosecution presented ample evidence showing that each of the contextual elements of crimes against humanity is satisfied at the required threshold for confirming the charges. During the period covered by the charges, the Davao Death Squad and the national network created by Mr. Duterte to commit the crimes carried out an attack against the civilian population within the meaning of Article 7(2)(a) of the statute, as reflected in a course of conduct involving the commission of multiple murders and attempted murders. The victims' accounts of events corroborate the prosecution evidence and show that the crimes they suffered were not spontaneous or isolated acts of violence, but rather a planned, directed, and organized attack against them. The attack was massive, carried out collectively with considerable seriousness, and directed against a multiplicity of civilians. The victims were all civilians. The repeated lethal operations were conducted in residential and other civilian settings. As already indicated, the victims largely came from marginalized communities, were suspected by the authorities of involvement in criminal, often drug-related activities, and together with their families, they were targeted in their homes and neighborhoods. The attack was widespread and systematic, and we refer, Your Honor, to Annex D and E of the prosecution pre-trial brief. The attack was widespread because of its large-scale nature and the number of victims. In this regard, the number of victims affected by the events within the charges is one of the most relevant factors to be taken into consideration for the purpose of determining under the chapeau of Article 7(1) of the statute whether the attack was widespread or systematic. The broad geographical spread of the victimization, combined with a significant number of victims, confirm the wide scope of the attack. As the prosecution has made clear yesterday and today, the instances of murders and attempted murders in the document containing the charges and in the pre-trial brief are simply illustrative of a much broader pattern of victimization. In fact, the actual scale of victimization extends well beyond the 49 incidents affecting 78 victims presented by the prosecution. The prosecution itself referred to thousands of civilians murdered. And we recall here the content of paragraph 73 of the prosecution pre-trial brief, as well as the remarks by Ms. Croft just 15-20 minutes ago. As reported by Human Rights Watch in a report published in 2022, since 2016, the Philippine police have admitted its involvement in the death of more than 6,200 people in drug raids across the country. In a 2020 report, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights reported 8,663 deaths occurred in the drug war. The Human Rights Commission of the Philippines and domestic human rights group report death tolls that are 2 to 3 times higher than the UN figure. The attack was also systematic, well-planned, and well-executed, following a standard modus operandi. In many cases, it began with an individual receiving a visit or a phone call from an official from the local barangay informing them that we were on a drug watch list drawn up by barangay officials and the police. In practice, these visits function less as warnings than as a means of confirming the identity and whereabouts of the intended target. As one victim reported, I quote, "A barangay official told my husband to surrender to the police because he was on the watch list as a drug user. He had given up drug use months earlier, so did not go. 2 weeks later, 3 armed masked men wearing bulletproof vests arrived at our home in Manila and handcuffed him. I could hear my husband begging for his life from outside the room. We were crying, and the other armed men threatened to kill us as well. Moments later, my husband was shot dead." End of quote. Survivors, relatives, and neighbors consistently recount that armed men typically work in groups of 2, 4, or a dozen. They wore either police uniform or civilian clothes, often all black, with their face concealed by balaclava-style headgear, masks, baseball caps, or helmets. They carried handguns. As one victim explained, and I quote, "On 6 June 2017, at about 9:45 in the evening, I was at home with my husband, and our children were sleeping upstairs. 4 unidentified men wearing helmets and bonnets arrived at home looking for my husband. They broke down the front door. I started begging them to spare the life of my husband. The man pushed me away. My husband was shot in the chest and fell face down. While lying face down, he was shot 5 more times in the nape and head. The children woke up terrified because of the gunshots." End of quote. Attackers frequently travel by motorcycle, typically with 2 individuals on a single bike. Often a van, invariably white or black, and at times bearing markings associated with police vehicles was also present. They banged on doors and barged into rooms. The attackers did not identify themselves or provide warrants. Family members report hearing beatings and their loved ones begging for their lives. And I quote again from the recollection of one of the victims. 5 masked armed men broke into our house in Bulacan province where my father was playing cards. We could see him kneeling in a surrendering position. The men grabbed him and slammed him into a concrete wall several times. And then, just they throw him outside. We saw the shooting. We were just there. My father's face was bleeding from being hit, and he was begging them for mercy when he was shot. End of quote. Another victim explained, quote, "My father collapsed to the floor but still tried to move, begging for his life. Yet the man continued shooting him. I couldn't count how many times I was so afraid. We also heard successive gunshots from outside. Later we found that also 2 of our neighbors were killed." End of quote. The shooting could happen immediately, behind closed doors or in the street, or the victims would be taken away by the gunman only for shots to be heard minutes later and the body to be discovered by local residents. At times, bodies were dumped elsewhere, sometimes with hands tied or heads wrapped in plastic. Relatives typically found them after being alerted by policemen or by the neighbors. A victim recalled, quote, 6 masked armed men broke into the house where a small group, including several teenagers, were watching television. The men arrested and beat 2 young boys they believed were drug suspects and then took them away on motorcycles. A half hour later, after hearing from a uniformed policeman, we, referring to the relatives, rushed to a nearby bridge to find their bodies, both with gunshot wounds to the head, their hands tied with cloth. The gunmen were still at the scene, while uniformed police cordoned off the area. Another victim recounted, quote, a week after his brother was killed, 10 police officers, some in civilian clothes, arrested my other son and took him to the local barangay office. That evening, masked armed men abducted him from the barangay office. Shortly afterwards, his body was found under a bridge a block away. When we found him, we saw that his entire head had been wrapped in packing tape and his hands had been tied behind his back. He had been shot execution style through the mouth. End of quote. And another one, quote, the body seemed like it was just thrown out. The nails were removed, one eyeball was missing, stuffed by cotton. End of quote. Relatives and witnesses often saw uniformed police in the immediate surroundings of the incident, securing the perimeter. Special crime scene investigators typically arrived within minutes. In numerous cases, an unregistered 38 or 45 caliber gun and a packet of shabu were found placed beside the body. And instead of fleeing from the police, the gunman would mingle with them. As one of the victims described, I quote, on 7 June 2018 in the morning, I was at home where I saw my son coming back from his work on the opposite side of the street. Suddenly, I saw 8 policemen, 3 in uniform and 3 in civilian clothes. 2 of them crossed the street. They took my son and banged his head against the wall. They accused him of selling shabu. He denied. He was then taken to the door of the house. He was shouting, "Mama, help me!" I took a piece of wood and hit one policeman. Suddenly, one policeman pointed the gun against my son. He shot twice, at the head and at the chest. While in shock, I saw one police officer placing 4 packets of shabu and a gun around the body of my son. End of quote. The same account of another victim who simply recalled, after the shooting of my son, who was only 19, uniformed police showed me his body in the house and a 45 caliber handgun next to his body. I told them that my son could not afford and did not possess a gun, and therefore could not possibly have attempted to shoot at the police. I said he cannot even pay the rent. His sister paid the rent for him. End of quote. On occasions, victims were still alive when found by the relatives and taken to the hospital, where they later succumbed to their injuries. Survivors recount the terror and enduring feeling of still being hunted as follows, and I quote, In September 2016, a police officer pretending to be a commuter boarded my tricycle. He asked me to pass by the police station. There, I was stopped by a group of men who turned to be police officers. I was taken to the precinct, beaten, and forced to reveal the identity of drug pushers. I didn't know. Later that evening, I was taken to a dark place and shot multiple times. Despite the injuries, I managed to escape and save my life. I still have the consequence of the injuries, and I feel deep sadness, anger, and fear of being caught again. End of quote. Another survivor explained, quote, "They killed my 4 friends kneeling and defenseless. I heard a barrage of gunshots, voices, and one officer saying, 'Let it be. Let's say they fought back and let's leave the evidence.' I lay next to one of my friends pretending to be dead. When the armed officer left, I crowded out of the room and headed towards the edge of a ravine. Holding my chest with one hand to stop the bleeding, I slid downwards and fell to the creek bed. I crossed it, climbed the hill on the other side, and walked toward the highway. There, I encountered someone I knew and desperately begged for help." End of quote. Although the charges concern only the crimes of murder and attempted murder, victims' accounts also reveal widespread acts of torture, ill treatment, and rape. Young people were particularly exposed to torture and cruel and inhuman treatments, including unlawful arrest. A number of victims participating in these proceedings were minor when they were attempted to be killed, and a number of victims participating in the proceedings recount the killing of their nephew, son, cousin, who was under 18 at the age of killing. And this morning, Mr. Jeremy provided the example of Kian de los Santos, who was 17 at the time of his killing. Reported forms of torture include beating, kicking, slapping, blows to the head, electrocution, and death threats. On several occasions, law enforcement officials used arrests, inclusion in the drug watch list, and drug-related accusations as a tool of coercion to perpetrate rape and other forms of sexual violence. In September 2018, a young boy was taken by the police and brought to the precinct. His mother recounted, I quote, "At the precinct, he was repeatedly coerced into confessing a crime he was accused of. If you don't admit, your life will be the price," they threatened him. When he refused to confess, he was beaten with a gun and electrocuted. On the night of 16 September 2018, between 9 and 10, I received a phone call from my cousin urging me to go in a certain location in Manila. What I saw was a nightmare. My son had been discarded like an animal, his lifeless body lying on the boulevard, abandoned like a fish by the roadside. I rushed to the scene, but I was blocked by the police. I was not even allowed to touch or embrace my son's body. Even in death, my son was not treated with dignity. It was like they just threw my son out like a pig. I finally found him at the funeral home, where I had to pay to recover the body. I had nothing, I was bargaining as if I were buying fish. In the end, I paid approximately 45,000 pesos to take my son's body for burial. Now I wonder, will justice ever be served?
Excuse me, Counsel, you have 5 minutes left.
Official police reports of these incidents invariably invoked self-defense to justify the killings, despite eyewitness accounts that portray the killings as cold-blooded murders of unarmed individuals. To bolster their claims, the police routinely planted guns, spent ammunition, and drug packets beside the bodies. While these official accounts contrasted markedly with the ones provided by relatives, they were notably consistent among themselves, typically characterized the incidents as buy-bust anti-drug operation, differing little besides the names, places, and dates. The victim was invariably described as a dealer who attempted to sell to undercover officers conducting a buy-bust operation. Specialized local anti-drug units called Station Anti-Illegal Drug Special Operation Task Units were usually involved. According to the reports, the victim, after being put under arrest, often uncuffed, allegedly pulled out a weapon and sought to shoot the police. In every case, the victim was killed, and none of the arresting officers were armed. In most cases, the police reporting having found shabu on or near the victim's corpse, and sometimes a gun. Often, after the killing, the bodies of the victims were brought directly to the funeral parlors. Families then had to start their calvary to find the body of their loved ones, and they had to pay high fees to retrieve the bodies. R/50082/25 had to sell the house to be able to pay for her brother's funeral and burial. Sometimes the bodies were instead left on the street or thrown into the water in a plastic bag. I believe it's a good time to stop for the flow of the speech. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Merci beaucoup, Maître.
Thank you very much, Ms. Masida. The hearing is now suspended, and we shall resume at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Yan mga kabombo ang bahagi ng presentation ng panig po ng Common Legal Representatives of Victims, no? At ilang abogado mula ho sa panganig ng mga biktima ang pinagbigyan na makapagsalita. Kanina ay unang sumalang ho itong si Robin Croft, at pagkatapos nung statement itong si Edward Jeremy ay nagbigay din ng kanyang statement at naglahad ng mga merito ng reklamo laban kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Sa kabuuan po ng kanilang presentation ay ilang ulit tinukoy yung mga co-perpetrators, ano? At yung mga talumpati, mga statement ng mga personalidad na binabanggit na may partisipasyon dito sa War on Drugs campaign, at yung plan na sinasabi na iniuugnay itong mga co-perpetrators at si former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. So tabay pa mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, sa magiging takbo nitong pagdinig po na ito dyan sa International Criminal Court. At for now, yan muna yung ating pagtugaygay dito mga kabombo. At yan ang tinutukan natin ng mga kaganapan kaugnay pa rin ng International Criminal Court proceedings dyan sa The Hague sa Netherlands. At mula rito sa Bombo News Center, Makati, this is Bombo Radio Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radio, Bombo.
For the most trusted source of news and information, visit our website at www.bomboradio.com. Follow us on Bombo Radio mobile app, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter. Like, share, and stay connected. Anytime, anywhere.
Ang prutas nga durian dili lamang lamion. Ang prutas nga durian dili lamang lamian kun dili adunay ubay-ubay usab kini nga mga health benefits.